Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen, and thank you for joining me for another journey into the world of shinobi. Before we begin, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who listens, supports the channel, and enjoys these stories. Today's story is part 4 of Positive Intervention. In this story, Naruto's childhood was filled with loneliness. Ignored by the village, feared by the people, and forced to grow up alone. But what if things had gone differently? What if someone had stepped in before the damage was done? At the age of 7, Jiraiya of the Sannin makes a decision that will change Naruto's life forever. Instead of leaving him behind in Konoha, Jiraiya takes Naruto on the road, raising him as his apprentice and teaching him the true ways of a shinobi. For 5 years Naruto trains under the legendary Toad Sage, learning powerful jutsu, discipline, and what it truly means to protect the people he cares about. When Naruto finally returns to the Hidden Leaf at age 12, he is no longer the lonely prankster the village remembers. He has become something far more dangerous. The student of Jiraiya. This is a fan-made story inspired by the world of Naruto. All characters in the original universe belong to their respective creators. This narration is created for entertainment purposes as part of a transformative storytelling experience. The story itself was written by Stolen Hawk 22, and full credit goes to the original author. If you would like to read the original version, the link to the story is included in the video description below. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Chapter 19. Preliminary Round. Naruto was uncharacteristically tired when they arrived at the tower. He chalked it up to having been unconscious and for all intents and purposes nearly dead. Hinata, despite barely being physically functional, was the one to figure out the riddle. They unfurled the scrolls and Naruto immediately recognized the seals written within the scrolls as summoning. On his command his team flung the scrolls across the room. Smoke billowed out of them, but they relaxed when it was none other than Iruka-sensei. Congratulations. To think I would end up with your Tei. Iruka was cut off by Hinata collapsing, apparently having only been conscious through willpower alone until they passed. Oh Hinata. Iruka moved to catch her before she could hit the ground, but Naruto beat him to it. We need a med nin Iruka. She's been through a lot. I need to speak with Jiraiya-sensei and Gigi immediately too. The darkness on Naruto's face told Iruka everything he needed to know. The upbeat, cheery boy was gone in that moment. While Naruto had clearly been taking the last several years of training extremely seriously, he still had that childish spark in him at all times. Iruka could not see that spark now. He hesitated only a second, worried about one of his favorite students, before he kneaded and sped off. You should get some rest, Sasuke. Naruto ground out. Sasuke felt fine, felt good, actually. Really good. He had to bite back the urge to argue with his best friend, but managed to hold his tongue. He too sped off with only a grunt. That left Naruto alone in the room, holding Hinata in his arms. Hinata? Naruto trembled as his fists clenched on her jacket. Thank you. He finally settled on. It wasn't enough. Nothing would be. It was only a few more seconds before a familiar Anbu member snuck up on him. It was a monkey-masked ninja. Naruto often caught glimpses of him or sensed him during his times with Konohamaru. He was followed closely by 2 medic nins in their tan uniforms. He handed Hinata off to them with a grateful nod. Uzumaki, you made it. The tone was bland, but Naruto got the strange feeling that Anbu had been hoping he would. He quirked his head in question, but was completely ignored. The Hokage has granted you an audience. Top floor. They're expecting you. Naruto nodded quietly, and began his trudge to the top of the tower. He pushed through the doors, paying no mind to the Anbu guard. They, in turn, pretended as if he didn't even exist. An oddly familiar feeling for the young blonde. He shrugged it off. The Hokage had his back turned to him, something only a truly powerful shinobi could afford to do, and was looking out the far window of the tower. Ah, Naruto-kun, I'm glad to see you are up and about so soon after your fight. His tone was light, but there was a seriousness hidden behind it. A hint of worry. You know I heal fast, Gigi. Where's Jiraiya? Naruto clearly was not in the mood for games, though he kept his voice even. The Hokage sighed, a puff of smoke floating and swirling up over his hat. He turned slowly, whether from old age or to buy himself time, it was impossible to tell. I sent him after Orochimaru. You did what? Naruto, you know he's the strongest ninja I have at my disposal. He's not a tool, Naruto said, anger finally leaking into his voice. He was having flashbacks to Haku. He's not yours to use. He might be a powerful shinobi, but he's a person too. Here is inside again. Naruto-kun, day by day you become more powerful, and therefore more exposed to our society and how it works. He paused, carefully considering his words. It's a dark world we live in, and sometimes we have to do things we do not wish to do. As Hokage, I have to set my feelings aside. Naruto opened his mouth to argue, but was silenced by a gentle hand on his shoulder. Other times, I had to consider them. Do you know what Lord first told me being a Hokage was? Naruto shook his head, anger forgotten in the moment. He told me that being Hokage made the entire village your family, and you were the head of it. Hiruzen began pacing around the room, puffing on his pipe. Everything that happens in this village lands on my shoulders. Prosperity and famine, success and failure. That means that every ninja of this village that dies because of me. But that means every ninja that lives because of you too. The Hokage chuckled, a deep, gravely sound from his chest. Ever the optimist. An admirable trait. My point is, there are very few ninja that I can send after my lost student. Kakashi and Guy stand a chance, but they are watching over their team, and there's a good chance that they will not survive the encounter. It is because I am so close to Jiraiya that I had to send him after his former teammate. Hiruzen saw the questioning look in the genin's eyes, and chose to elaborate, and speak of things he long since had tried to push away, even from his own eyes. Orochimaru was a genius, much like Sasuke-kun is. Every jutsu I showed him he took to immediately. He was smart, cunning, and devious. The model shinobi, or so I thought. Jiraiya was a failure, simply put. He had plenty of potential, and no place to focus it. I spent much of our team's training time focusing on Orochimaru and Tsunade. A sadness crossed the Hokage's face as he thought about his past. But I spent even more of my free time working with Jiraiya. The boy needed to be challenged. He couldn't learn a jutsu immediately, but given the proper incentive, he would spend weeks training, working until his hands had chakra burns and his whole body shook. As time passed, he began to catch his two teammates, slowly at first. When he signed the Toad contract, it was like he took on a whole new purpose in his life. Never have I been more proud of a shinobi of our village. He paused, and let those words sink into Naruto. The boy was battered, covered in dirt and blood, skin still pink from the burns he had freshly healed from. Yet, there was a look of wonder plastered on the boy's face. In that moment, Hiruzen admired him too, for his ability to see the wonder in the world, even after all he had been through. By his late teens he had become a powerhouse for the village. As he grew strong and steadfast, Tsunade, and especially Orochimaru began to waver. Orochimaru began to grow darker and greedier, though I was blind to it. Tsunade lost her loved ones, and with it, her love for the village. Jiraiya's love of the village has only grown stronger though. Tsunade left us. Jiraiya trained our strongest Hokage. Orochimaru turned traitor, and he too left us. Jiraiya went after him, and created the strongest spy network the world hasn't ever seen. Did you know he holds the record for most completed missions? None have served this village better than Jiraiya. We tried to make him Hokage. Do you know why he turned it down? Naruto could only shake his head, eyes wide and glinting. Sometime between Chunin and Jonin, he and Orochimaru developed a friendship. Some would see it as one-sided, but I know Oro felt at least close to the way Jiraiya did. When Minato paid the ultimate price for the village, we decided Jiraiya would become Hokage. He turned it down. He said, "How can I become the protector of this village, if I can't even save my best friend?" A heavy silence hung for several seconds. The moral of this long rant, by a senile old man, is this. Jiraiya must be sent, not only because he's the only one that can do it, but because he has earned the duty and responsibility, to be the one to take down his friend. He didn't want to leave, and he argued with me, another right he has earned. Yet he still took the mission, because he feels the same way I do, whether he'll admit it or not. The village is his home, the people his family, and he will go above and beyond the call to service to protect it. Do you know what I call that? Naruto, holding his breath now, could only shake his head again. The will of fire, my boy. The will of fire. Naruto felt a warm feeling swell up in his chest, forcing him to let go of his breath. Pride. He was proud of Jiraiya, so proud. He'd wanted to be like him since the week that he'd first left the village with him, but that was a child's dream of a hero who was larger than life. Now, as an adult and soldier of his village, he'd never wanted to be like his father figure more. Hiruzen allowed him several moments to collect his bearings, perhaps doing the same himself, before he continued. Now, Naruto-kun, you came for Jiraiya, what did you need? Naruto finally snapped back to reality. Orochimaru left a seal on Sasuke's neck. Looks like the Tomo in his Sharingan kinda, seems to be leaking a ugly chakra. My Fuinjutsu isn't high enough to get rid of it yet. I was hoping Pervy Sage could take a look at it. Sarutobi's face seemed to grow a few more lines in the seconds before he spoke. That is troubling. We have another who has been marked similarly by my old student. I will bring her and Kakashi-kun to see him, and we will have a look at it before the preliminaries. Preliminaries? Ah, yes. We have a particularly strong crop this year, and more are making it through the forest than anticipated, so we will have a series of one-on-one fights to determine who moves on to the final round. Naruto looked troubled, but held his tongue. Speak, boy, Hiruzen said, with the sternness of a leader, but the kindness of a grandfather. Naruto debated saying anything for another second and then two, before he spoke. There's another, like me. A Jinchuuriki, I think. Gaara from Sand. I don't want anyone else fighting him. Naruto, I can't select who fights, we're a shinobi village, Gigi. You can. You have to. He will kill whoever he fights. Hinata and Sasuke are in no shape to fight an enemy that's strong right now. The rest just aren't ready. It has to be me. You'd ask me to put one of the village's strongest genin in danger. The container of our only Biju no less? Sarutobi had to hold back a grimace at Naruto's ever so slight flinch at his words. The boy quickly found himself overflowing with anger. You'd ask me to let one of my friends die? I can't do that. I won't do that. That's not your decision to make, Naruto. There was a pressure starting to build in the room as Hiruzen's voice gained a sharpness Naruto wasn't very familiar with. He forged on anyway. You're right. It's your decision, and you need to make it. He was nearly shouting now. The Hokage let loose his chakra, bearing it down on Naruto. It would have been enough to make a lesser Chunin fall unconscious. His voice boomed as he spoke. I will make the decision that is best for the village. I will not be bullied into it by a genin. Naruto responded by flaring his own chakra and bringing it down on the Hokage. It wasn't much in comparison, but it got his point across. How can you sit here and tell me about Jiraiya having to do missions because of his strength, but then try and let me sacrifice one of my friends? He shouted. I won't do it. I will fight soon as Jinchuuriki. The last words were calm. Eerily calm compared to the anger the boy had just shown. He gave his Hokage one last look somewhere between pleading and pissed off, before storming out of the room, breaking a door off its hinge as he did so. Sarutobi could only sigh yet again. He took another puff of his pipe before uttering to himself, more and more like your mother and Jiraiya every day. Determined like your father as always. Another puff of the pipe. If only I could stop myself from failing you like I failed them. He lamented. The next few days passed slowly. Naruto cooled down after a while, Hinata was released from medical care, and Sasuke seemed to lighten up, if only a little bit. Kakashi-sensei and the purple-haired proctor who they'd fought in the forest, Anko was her name, came to see Sasuke, though the Hokage was absent. Kakashi took Sasuke and Naruto to a dark corridor, and proceeded to seal the curse mark. Naruto had a hard time paying close attention, something that was abnormal to him. His head still felt foggy, though he was sure any concussion he had should have been healed by now. Sasuke would be okay though, if Anko was any indication. He just had to have a strong will, something Naruto knew he had in spades. Team 10 and 9 wandered in at some point. Team 8 had managed to be the first team in, behind the Sand Trio, as did an older team from Konoha, with that Kabuto guy they'd met in the first part of the exam. Eventually the time limit ran out, and all the surviving teams were assembled in the basement of the tower. It was a large room made mostly of stone, with balconies on either side looking down on what Naruto supposed would be the stage for the fight. In front of them, the Hokage and Jonin-sensei were standing on a stone platform, lifted a foot or so above the rest of the floor by the Hokage himself. Gigi gave them the spiel about how the exams were a substitute for war, and that a good showing would bring prosperity to their village. Naruto barely heard him. He was focused on the redhead who was staring daggers at him, as if he was trying to kill him with his eyes. His face was oddly calm despite what his eyes said. It was terrifying. The Hokage kept going, and announced there would be a preliminary round. Shouts of indignation came from the genin. Naruto paid it no mind. At some point Kabuto dropped out. Probably for the better, he looked like hell. The Hokage left, important matters to attend to he was sure. A new voice spoke around coughing fits. The Jonin proctor he supposed. He recited the rules, not that anyone here would truly follow them. Especially Gaara. He finally snapped back to attention when he announced that first match would appear on the board. He looked to the digital screen in time to see names begin to flash. He spotted his flashing through, spotted Gaara's, Hinata's, Sasuke's, and a few he didn't recognize. Finally it slowed to a stop. Sasuke versus Yoroi. Good. One bullet dodged. The old man had never actually agreed to let him be the one to fight Gaara. Each name that was called off the board would be a relief to him. Sasuke's fight happened quickly. He was well rested, better than his opponent at least. The curse mark didn't seem to hamper him in any way, and when it was discovered that his opponent could steal chakra, Sasuke zipped one way and then another. Activating his Sharingan as he moved in, he avoided the open palm of his opponent and quickly delivered a blow to his temple, knocking him unconscious completely. He coolly put his hands back in his pockets and leapt back up to join his teammates on the balcony. Yamato-sensei seemed to relax at that, however minutely. It had taken a while for Naruto to learn to read his sensei, and betrained as he surely was. He knew him well enough to know when he was tense though, and that was the worst he'd ever seen it. To be fair, he himself had been quite tense going into it. As much as he trusted Sasuke, he didn't trust a thing about Orochimaru. His whole team was relieved that the curse mark didn't seem to have any adverse effect. While they waited for the medics to carefully remove Yoroi from the battlefield, Ino and Sakura came trotting over to them. "Nice fight, Sasuke-kun." "Yeah, great job, Sasuke," they chirped. Sasuke glanced over at Naruto, clearly irritated. Naruto rolled his eyes and flicked them at their fellow genin. Sasuke sighed. "Ino, Sakura, thank you, and good luck in your fights." He smiled, though it looked pained. Both girls flushed and Sakura might even have squealed before returning to their respective teams. "Why do you make me do that?" Sasuke questioned. "You mean be social and get along with your comrades?" I wonder why." Naruto said sarcastically. All he received was a half-grunt half-sigh from his teammate, to which he grinned. The names began to roll again, and Naruto held his breath. This time they landed on Sakura and Lee. More relief came to him, though he was sure this was going to be a painful fight for Sakura. He was not ready, however, for Lee to declare his love for Sakura before the proctor could start the fight. Even more surprising, was Lee declaring that he would not hold back out of respect for her. That was probably going to be good for Sakura in the long run, and very bad for her in the immediate future. The fight started, and Sakura made some textbook maneuvers. Thrown shuriken to force Lee to move from his spot. Regular clones to cause confusion while he was moving. Typical stuff, but generally effective. If your opponent is of similar speed. Lee was fast. He took one step to the side and flew past the shuriken and struck Sakura with a fierce punch before she could finish her jutsu. Sakura barely managed to get a forearm up in time to take the blow, and she was sent rolling back by it. No doubt her forearm was damaged. Possibly broken. To her credit though, she gritted her teeth, and smashed a smoke bomb into the ground. 5 pink heads emerged from the smoke in different directions, and Lee, ever the vigorous one, hunted them down one by one, smashing punches and kicks through their intangible bodies. 5 clones had been dispensed off, leaving a clueless Rock Lee standing in the middle of the floor as the smoke began to clear. Suddenly he was dodging attacks and projectiles that were too fast for Naruto to see. "Ah, Genjutsu. The sneaky little witch," a lazy drawl said. Out of nowhere Kakashi-sensei seemed to have materialized, leaning against the wall with one leg up, his lone eye focused intently on his book. There was no way he could see the fight from the angle he was at. Naruto rolled his eyes yet again. For his nonchalant act, Kakashi sure had a flair for the dramatic. Turning his attention back to the fight, he saw that Sakura had remained in the smoke and cast her jutsu from there. It gave her the precious moments she needed in a fight where there would be few. She began to move as smoothly as possible towards where Lee was erratically dodging non-existent attacks. No doubt she was trying to get a kunai to his neck so he would have to forfeit. Before she could get to him though, Lee dodged smack into a wall, seemingly jarring his entire body with the force of his well-trained muscles. It took him a second to readjust to his surroundings before he sped at Sakura. He landed a kick to her ribs, no doubt cracking them, then turned, pivoting into a punch. Sakura shifted out of the way just enough that his fist glanced off her jaw more than it caught her. Still, she flew back, holding her jaw as she landed on the concrete and skidded. Lee was on her in a second, kunai produced from who knows where, and inside Sakura's guard. The proctor declared him the winner. "I am sorry, Sakura," he exclaimed. "I did not wish to hurt you, but I had to show the world that I am a splendid shinobi." Sakura, who looked much like she was on the verge of tears, shook her head and flashed through a few of the general shinobi hand signs. Of course she would know those. "Good fight. Thank you." A few of the genin on the balcony seemed confused by what had just happened. Kakashi sighed. Kurenai took the time to explain. The physical pain of running into the wall broke the genjutsu. She did a great job casting it, but she lost focus when she tried to end the fight, and ended up leading him directly into the wall. Naruto wasn't paying much attention to her. Jiraiya had taught him all about breaking genjutsu on his 9th birthday. He was more focused on the digital board that was once again flashing with names. It stopped on a Hyuga. He inhaled. Neji Hyuga. Exhaled. His opponent would be Dosu of the Sound, a team that was conspicuously missing their sensei. Before Neji could meet his opponent on the battlegrounds, Hinata stopped him, whispering in his ear. He scoffed at her, shooting a glare her way as he leapt down. She quickly returned to her team. "Why do you help him, Hinata? You know it's only going to grow his ego. He's already bad enough." Sasuke shot at her. "I do not wish to see any harm come to my cousin. He is family." Sasuke rolled his eyes, and Hinata allowed a small smile. The fight was over nearly before it started. As the proctor dropped his hand, both contestants lunged for each other. Dosu with his gauntlet drawn back, Neji leading with a two-fingered point typical of the gentle fist. Neji was quicker. The Hyuga completed his lunge by striking at the shoulder of Dosu's gauntleted arm, jamming chakra in what Naruto was sure was a tenketsu point, effectively making the arm useless for a short time. Dosu grunted and tried to use it anyway, but it was clear there wasn't any chakra coming from it. Neji dodged his swing deftly, long hair flowing in the wind of the strike, a smug look on his face. He brutally added 10 more strikes to essentially shut down Dosu's physical capabilities. The Sound Ninja crumpled. "Neji, your youth is admirable, but you should have some respect for your opponent," his sensei shouted. "Why should I have respect for such trash? He was destined to lose to me." Guy frowned at that, and Rock Lee began an enthusiastic argument with his teammate, but Naruto had drawn his attention back to the board once more. The digital board that decided their fate. He found it odd. All thoughts were dismissed when Hinata's name was landed on, followed by Kabuto's other teammate, who he didn't recognize. A huge sigh of relief. His highest priorities were relatively safe. Hinata's fight was easy, despite the fact that she wasn't quite fully recovered from all her injuries. The older genin could turn his bones to rubber or something of the like. The gentle fist attacked soft tissue. He stood no chance. She politely put him down with the necessary force, apologized, and then returned to her team. She received a hug from Naruto, a high five from Sasuke. Yamato's sensei gave her a bow, which she returned. Finally, she received an eye smile and head pat from Kakashi, who had somehow managed to maneuver his way over to them without anybody noticing. Tamari from the Sand and Ten from Team 10 were drawn next. The Leaf Kunoichi put up a brave fight, and while his arsenal was vast, it was too pigeon-holed. The Wind User defeated her soundly, letting her land bent over her fan cruelly as she succumbed to her cyclone-like jutsu. Another safe, although minorly injured, comrade, Temari's brother, Kankuro, was drawn next to fight Shikamaru. The Nara looked like it was the last thing in the world that he wanted to do, but made his way down regardless. The fight was the most drawn out by far, both choosing to fight longer range. The problem was that Shikamaru was too far to reach the puppet user. He would be able to catch the puppet in his shadow and freeze its chakra, but then he would also be stuck while Kankuro was free to move and throw projectiles at him. Eventually he maneuvered his way close enough to catch the puppet user, but was caught in a cloud of poison just as he completed his jutsu. He tried to hold his breath and make it out, but no doubt ingested some. He tactically retreated and decided that a forfeit was in his best interest. He immediately made his way to the medics so they could treat him, as Kankuro had claimed to have forgotten the antidote. Shino faced Zaku from Sound next. An uncharacteristically bloody fight for the bug user. He used his allies to plug the holes in Zaku's arms, and the genin foolishly had tried to use his jutsu anyway, and lost both arms below the elbow because of it. 4 Konoha shinobi left. 3 more fights. The board flashed through the remaining names. Naruto, Gaara, Choji, Ino, Kiba, Kin. He saw them all. Kin versus Choji. A sigh of relief. He'd only had to deal with the anxiety of waiting one more time. Choji lost, which was tough, but hopefully he'd learned his lesson. He'd been too hesitant to hurt a kunoichi who hadn't done anything to him. She ruthlessly put him under a genjutsu and shot him full of senbon until he was temporarily paralyzed. Better to happen now when he would be okay within minutes than out in the real world where he would surely be dead or captured. The final drawing of the big digital board began to play. Ino's name appeared, and he decided right then that if she or Kiba had to fight Gaara he would interfere with the match. Kiba. Thank the toads. Kiba versus Ino. They were safe. Konoha was safe. His family was safe. His comrades made their way down to fight each other. A fight he subconsciously predicted Kiba would win, with his superior speed and strength. His conscious mind was focused on his opponent already though. Gaara of the Sand. Jinchuuriki of undoubtedly what was the one-tailed beast. Jiraiya had given him the basic rundown of the other Jinchuuriki. He would control sand. The rumors said his Biju won't let him sleep. Naruto was worried. The look in the redhead's eyes told him a lot. They told a story of what he could have been. Perhaps what he would have been if it weren't for Jiraiya and Iruka and Gigi. At some point, Kiba won the fight. He wasn't paying it any attention though. For the first time in his life since he'd started training to be a shinobi, a real shinobi, he was scared. He'd asked for it though, shouldn't he be more calm if this is what he wanted? His heart rate was speeding up. He tried to take a deep breath but if it helped he didn't notice. Are you okay, Naruto-kun? Hinata asked. She and Sasuke were looking at him. They could always tell what he was thinking. Sasuke's eyes flashed red. Naruto stared into them and let the minor genjutsu take hold. Why he and Sasuke had first started doing this, he wasn't sure. At first he was just helping his friend work on his genjutsu, but when he learned that they could communicate through it, a possibility arose. The mind, and by extension, chakra, worked faster than the real world. Just like when he entered his seal, time was slower in here. How much slower he wasn't truly sure, but it seemed as if they could have a short conversation with only a moment passing. Most wouldn't even notice it, and those that did would have trouble reacting in time for it. Hinata and Yamato knew of course, as did Kakashi, but there wasn't any reason for them to interfere. You're scared? Sasuke thought to him. He could hear the voice, could see Sasuke, but Sasuke wasn't moving. It was as if the reality had frozen. Yes, he's like me. I know. Then why aren't you worried? Because he's like you, but he's unstable. He won't be able to analyze and think and react the way you do. You'll win, Sasuke said. Naruto ignored his comment for the moment. I could have turned out like him, you know. Sasuke nodded, though Naruto felt the action more than saw it. A strange thing genjutsu were. Yeah, I know. I feel the same way. If it weren't for those closest to us, we could have been a wreck. Who knows if we would even be friends? Naruto said. I do. Sasuke replied, a rare showing of emotion leaking into his voice. Better get going. The proctor is about to call you down. Naruto nodded, somehow certain that Sasuke would know that he did even though he couldn't move, and suddenly time seemed to resume. He turned to Hinata. Yeah, I'm good. Just a bit of an adrenaline rush before my fight. Be back in a flash. He winked at her and flipped into the arena, but the bravado didn't quite seem genuine to his team. Gaara of the Sand. The proctor called out between coughs. Naruto Uzumaki. Are you two ready? Naruto looked at his opponent, then nodded at the proctor. Gaara sat stone-cold staring dead ahead at the blonde. Hayate rolled his eyes, but raised his hand anyway. Alright then, fight. His arm dropped with a sharp whoosh. Sasuke versus Yoroi, winner Sasuke. Rock Lee vs Sakura, easy Lee victory. Neji vs Dosu, winner Neji. Hinata vs Neckguy, winner Hinata. Tamari vs Tenten, winner Tamari, canon. Kankuro vs Shikamaru, winner Kankuro. Shino vs Zaku, winner Shino, canon. Kin vs Choji, winner Kin. Kiba vs Ino, winner Kiba. Naruto vs Gaara, next chapter. Chapter 20. Battle of the Jinchuuriki. Fight. His arm dropped with a sharp whoosh. Naruto didn't move, neither did Gaara. They were sizing each other up. Naruto broke the tense silence that had developed with his usual charisma, acting more brave than he felt. So, Gaara of the Sand, come here often? And why do they call you that? Are you made out of sand? Do you live in a sandhouse? He put a hand on his chin in a thinking pose, looking off into the distance but not for a second taking his focus off of Gaara. I suppose everybody in Suna probably lives in a sandhouse, huh? He grinned. Gaara didn't even twitch a muscle in response. Mother will have your blood. That's kinda dark, you know. He sighed. Well, if it's blood she wants, let's see if we can't give her some. He threw a few kunai at Gaara, and immediately a wall of sand rose up to block them. It was fast. When it retracted, Gaara still hadn't moved a muscle. Ah, now I see why they call you that. That's a neat trick, he called out as he reached into his weapons pouch again. He pulled out a shuriken and threw it in the same motion. His hands flashed through hand signs as it flew, and immediately he knew something was wrong. One shuriken became 4, all of which were easily caught in Gaara's sand defense. Up on the balcony, Sasuke's red eyes picked up both fighters in detail. Something's wrong, he said aloud. Naruto's chakra isn't flowing properly. Naruto was feeling the same thing, and cursed himself for resting the last few days. He'd been pushing himself so hard before the exams that the fight with Orochimaru had all but forced him to rest. It had been a long time since his control had felt anywhere near this bad. He'd still gained insightful information on Gaara though. His wall went up either automatically or only with thoughts. If he could come from enough directions and distract his mind enough, he might be able to sneak through the defense. He formed a hand sign, pumping chakra into it. Delicately he attempted to mold his chakra, and felt it fluctuating all over the place. He focused even harder and grunted as he let loose the jutsu. 3 shadow clones came into existence. Pitiful for him, and he realized just how much trouble he was in. He could work with it at the very least though. The clones began sprinting to surround Gaara. Projectiles flew from every direction at the sand genin, but each and every one was blocked. Give mother your blood, he said. His voice was starting to trend from toneless to unstable, bloodlust leaking into it. He raised a hand, and a wave of sand flew at the real Naruto. Fast as it was, it quickly overwhelmed him and enveloped him. Gaara made a claw shape with his hand and turned it, shutting it quickly into a fist. Sand coffin. The sand responded immediately, and crunched down on Naruto. Gaara had a small look of confusion on his face. 2 more kunai came from the left, blocked by his sand. He turned to look at who threw them, but 6 more came from behind, followed by the clone that had let them loose. A massive punch struck his sand wall, but it held. Another clone came from his left, leapt upward, and threw several projectiles at him. As they converged, so did several more from 3 different directions. Gaara was confused, but his sand wall rose up to meet the challenge. Quick as lightning, the real Naruto, the one who had thrown the first kunai after his clone was crushed by sand, flashed past the sand that had already risen. He was behind Gaara now, and as the boy turned left to see what was happening, Naruto placed his hand on Gaara's shoulder. A while ago, Jiraiya had taught him a Biju chakra suppression seal. Its intention was to be written on a tag, preferably with Naruto's blood, and given to his teammates in case he ever lost control. Theoretically, it could stop up to 4 tails of power, so it should work on the one tail. He had even committed the chakra control to memory after he met Gaara for the first time, just in case he would need it in the exams. Chakra memory is a fickle thing though, and relies on control being the same as when it was remembered. Like throwing a kunai became muscle memory, if you got much stronger between throws, the memory is no good until you've adjusted to your new level. Naruto's chakra control was all out of whack, and it was in that moment that he had a flash of a memory of Orochimaru laying some sort of seal on his stomach as he came out of his Biju days. It felt more like a dream than real life, enough that he questioned if it was even true. Gaara made eye contact with him as the seal began to materialize from his palm. The black ink spread into the shape of the seal he needed. It was wrong though. Where there should be sharp lines, it was rounded. Thin became thick, and there were even a few offshoots that weren't even of his intended creation. The spiderweb of black failed to take hold of Gaara's chakra. The glint in the redhead's eyes told Naruto he was in a bad spot. A wave of sand, bigger than the first one, smashed into him. He flew several meters, landing on the concrete as it drove him into it. Hard. The momentum it had given him, though, prevented it from taking hold. He rolled with it onto his feet, immediately dodging left, trying to escape the sand. A second wave came at him from the other direction. Both of Gaara's hands were up now, and he had a look of intense concentration on his face. Naruto continued dashing left, straight at the second wave of sand. He feinted right, hoping to open up a way to make some space, but the sand welcomed it and shifted to his left. He looked up and paled ever so slightly. It looked to him as if he was being herded towards Gaara. The sand's Jinchuuriki didn't appear to have much physical prowess, but controlling the sand took chakra control, and that was easier the closer your chakra was. He began weaving through the sand, trying to come up with a plan, even as the larger waves broke off into smaller, almost spear-like sections. Slide, roll, dash, jump, lunge. He did everything he could to avoid the sand. He was too slow though, and he knew it. If he had his normal chakra control to augment his movements, it might be a different story. He didn't though, no use thinking about what if. He had one more plan in his head, one that likely wouldn't require control. He let the sand work him closer to Gaara, and pushed his body to its limit as the sand seemed to increase in speed the closer they got. He ran through the hand seals for his water bullet as he ducked under another slice of sand. He left the last hand sign off, and channeled as much chakra as he could into it. An experiment he'd been doing with Sasuke had led to this idea. Trying to use less hand signs to do jutsu could sometimes lead to disastrous results. A large ball of water quickly took form in front of him, as he willed it to become as sticky as possible and promptly exploded. The result was water. Somewhat syrupy water. Everywhere. Up on the balcony, ceiling, and most importantly, Gaara's sand. There was an opening, and he was going to take it. He sped towards Gaara, who was standing, somewhat in shock, in the middle of the floor. His sand was laid out all across the battleground, and slow to react. It rose, vibrating in sound, trying to clear the water out. It wouldn't get to Naruto in time to stop him though. Naruto pulled his right fist back, and loaded as much power, and as much chakra as he could into it. He planted his left leg, and threw the hardest punch he ever had, right at Gaara's cheek. The sand's Jinchuuriki stood there, shocked like a Nara in headlights, as the punch slammed into his face. He was knocked to one knee, crouched over it. Up on the balcony, everybody, especially the sand shinobi, seemed to be in shock. Naruto stood there, still holding his follow-through, huffing and puffing. It had felt like several minutes of dodging, but probably was no more than 10 seconds. His body ached nonetheless. He looked down at Gaara. A low sound came from Gaara. Huh? Naruto inquired. Blood. Gaara ground out, whipping his head around to look at Naruto. It revealed a crack on his face, and crumbling sand falling off of it. Mother wants your blood. He lashed a hand out. Sand that had been coating his body rushed off of him with its full speed. It seemed to move in slow motion for Naruto. He couldn't move out of the way, couldn't move at all. Suddenly it was upon him, latched onto the arm that had thrown the punch, and the leg he was leaning on. It pulled him off balance. As he fell, he saw the look of pure bloodlust and hate in Gaara's eyes. The redhead pulled his hand into a fist. There was a blood-curdling scream in the arena that rang through the walls and may well have cracked a few of them. It was followed by a psychotic laugh. Mother loves your blood. That's enough. The match is over. The proctor yelled. And now she will have the rest of it. A huge wave of sand followed his words, crashing towards Naruto. The proctor was too far away, having jumped clear of the giant explosion of water earlier. He would never get there in time. Naruto laid there, broken and bleeding, struggling to remain conscious. This can't be how it ends. Not like this. I still have to become Hokage. But there was no more strength left within Naruto Uzumaki, and he lost consciousness. The sand was but a moment from crushing him, when it was blown back by a huge bout of power. When the dust cleared, there were shinobi of Konoha standing between Naruto and Gaara. Guy, Yamato, and Kakashi led the way, Sasuke standing with them. Hinata was right by Naruto's side, desperately trying to help him. A shadow crawled down from the balcony from behind the sand's Jinchuuriki. The lightning from Kakashi's jutsu still crackled in the air. "It's over. Return to your sensei," Kakashi barked coldly. He made a point to look at the sand Jonin with his Sharingan. "Or face the consequences." "Gaara, let's go," Baki said shakily. It was bad enough he had to deal with Gaara when he was like this, but now the copy ninja wanted his head too. Gaara did not move. He stared with a smile at where Naruto lay. Gaara began to turn to walk towards his sensei, and the Leaf Jonin turned their attention to Naruto. Gaara paused. "I will have his blood," he said quietly. The lone pair of Sharingan that remained in the Leaf Village saw his lips move, and read what he said. Sasuke continued to stare at Gaara, every bit of will being used to keep himself in place and not attack. He felt the mark on his neck slither, heard it whisper in his mind to take its power and crush the one who would hurt his friend. He did nothing to quell the thoughts, only continued to try and remain in place, and not do anything that could start a war. He felt as the mark sent a pulse of chakra through him. Pure power. He knew, instinctively, that he would win a fight against Gaara if he used it. He was about to allow it to lend him some power when he felt a hand on his shoulder, right on the mark. "Uke, Sasuke." He turned toward Kakashi, who looked as cold as he'd ever seen him. He'd always wondered why the lazy Jonin who liked to light-hearted mind games with everybody and was always late was so respected. This was why. This wasn't the same Kakashi he'd been around for the last 5 years. This was a killer, a veteran of a shinobi war, and an S-rank ninja. "Now is not the time," he ordered. "You can't fight him here, not now. You'll start a war. Focus on Naruto." His best friend's name shocked him out of his rage, and in an instant he was by his side. Hinata was running green glowing hands over Naruto, but she looked like she was in shock. He understood the feeling. Never in 1,000 years did he think Naruto would be beat, let alone this hurt. His best friend just had a knack for finding a way to defeat the odds. A medic pushed them all out of the way, followed by 2 more. One got to work on Naruto's leg, another on his arm. The third pulled a stretcher out of a storage scroll, and quickly they moved him onto it. Just like that he was being ushered out of the building, and Sasuke and Hinata were hot on his tail. The other genin looked on in shock. They couldn't believe Naruto had gotten hurt. He was by far the best of them. If he couldn't beat that Gaara kid, then none of them would have even come close. Secretly, a few of them had even believed that Naruto might even be able to beat their own sensei. It was a shock to the system for all who watched. The proctor did his best to finish out the event. Those 2 had been the last fight. Kakashi had sent an Anbu member from the shadows to tell the Hokage what had happened. Yamato had left to check on Naruto, Kakashi assuring him that he would relay the necessary information to the team members who had passed. Hayate called them out in a line. None moved. He sighed, then coughed, and decided to move on with the explanation of what was to come for the final round. He called them forward one by one to draw numbers. Kakashi drew for both Sasuke and Hinata. The final round stacked like this: Lee vs Neji, Hinata vs Temari, Kankuro vs Shino, Kin vs Kiba, Sasuke vs Gaara, winner 1 vs winner 2, winner 3 vs winner 4, winner 6 vs winner 7 vs winner 5. It had been a while since they'd had a 3-person fight to decide the finals of the exam. It had been a difficult decision for him to give the bye to the 5th match. As proctor, it was his job to judge them all, and generally give the bye to the strongest genin not of the village. Less fights means less of a chance to impress. Simultaneously, you don't want to take a fight away from the lone Uchiha that is loyal to the village. People would be coming in droves to see him. Ultimately, the fact that Gaara would definitely be trying to kill whoever he fought was the deciding factor. Less fights for him was safer for everybody. The genin and their sensei quickly dispersed after he gave them the date and time. The Konoha shinobi all headed in the direction of the hospital, and he followed them, though at a distance. It was half a day before Naruto woke up. The lack of light coming through the window told him it was the dead of night. He reached out lightly with his senses, and got 3 responses. Sasuke, Hinata, and Kakashi. They were all there in the dead of night while he slept? He moved to sit up and realized he couldn't. His right leg was held up in a sling, a massive cast wrapped around it. A matching setup for his right arm. He inhaled sharply, recalling what had happened. Then came the pain. Excruciating pain. He stifled a scream, but shook slightly in his bed. Kakashi was at his side, headband up, Sharingan blazing in an instant. Naruto, what is it? He asked worriedly. Naruto took several deep breaths, squinting his eyes shut as hard as he could. So hard he saw stars. Hurts. He ground out through a clenched jaw. Kakashi flared his chakra, and a second later there was a member of the Anbu there. Several seconds of agonizing pain later, a nurse came rushing through the door. Kakashi quickly directed her, and she used a jutsu on Naruto's head that dulled the pain. That's strange, she said, his pain medication shouldn't be even close to worn off yet. Kakashi deadpanned at her, putting his red eye away in the process. I have fast metabolism, Naruto said as the pain subsided. He looked at her pointedly, and she seemed to catch his meaning. Oh, right, I'll send for Dr. Yakushi. He'll know what to do, she said. Naruto thanked her, and Kakashi gave her a nod, and a flash of a hand sign to the Anbu, who melted into, he wasn't sure where, because he got distracted by a gentle hand on his shoulder. He looked up to see Hinata, with Sasuke standing right behind her, looking over her shoulder. Both of them had their dojutsu active. You guys, thank yo. A smack to his face cut him off. After a second to regain his bearings, he looked at his teammate. Hinata? Hokage-sama told us, she said shakily, tears forming in her white eyes. He told us you requested to fight him. She spat at him. The tears began falling. Why would you do that, Naruto? Sasuke asked him. There was a slight look of betrayal on his face. I didn't want anybody else to get hurt. Hinata, you weren't even fully recovered, and Sasuke, your mark. I didn't know what else to do, he said dejectedly. So you decided to fight the deadliest person in the exams? Hinata asked. Without your chakra flowing properly too. Sasuke added. What's going on with you? Naruto himself bit back tears, happy to have teammates who loved him so much. Sad, and immensely disappointed to have let them down. Orochimaru, he put a seal on me at the end of our fight. I was so exhausted from using the Kyuubi's chakra and being lit on fire that I had forgotten. I'm still not sure that it wasn't a dream, but my chakra control is ruined. He said. That explains why you didn't use any of your more powerful jutsu, or why your seal didn't work, or why you were so slow. Kakashi said. Thanks Kakashi-sensei, real helpful. Kakashi shot him an eye smile. I think it will take Jiraiya to fix the seal. Does anybody know where he is? The Hokage sent word to him, but he was trying to stay off the radar. It could be at least a few days before he even knows what happened. I imagine he'll be back immediately when he finds out though, Kakashi said. Naruto nodded in acknowledgement. They sat comfortably in silence after that. Hinata and Sasuke found seats on Naruto's bed, recounting what happened after he passed out, and doing their best to cheer him up. Kakashi seemed to pour himself into the nearest comfy seat, content to lazily sit in their presence. Where's Yamato-sensei? Naruto finally asked. He's watching the team from Suna. His techniques makes him uniquely suited for the task. A lazy drawl responded from behind its book. It took a second for it to dawn on Naruto why that was. He was so used to Sensei's wood style that he had almost forgotten its ability to tame Biju. Ah, right. It was at that moment that a doctor opened a door. He was in general shinobi fatigues, covered by a white lab coat. He looked alert, but his unkempt hair made it clear he'd just been woken up. He snagged the chart from the slot on his way in. Uzumaki-san, I hear your pain was an issue when you awoke? Yes, Dr. Yakushi. It didn't feel as if I had any painkillers at all. We can administer IV drip overnight to keep you pumped full of it. It might be easier to just continually use a medical jutsu to numb the pain during the day. You talk like I'm gonna be in here forever, Doc. I'll be just fine once my seal is fixed. Naruto said. Has nobody told you? Told me what? Naruto tilted his head, his long hair flopping about, untethered by his headband for once. Uzumaki-san, we aren't sure you're going to make a full recovery. What do you mean? Surely you know what's inside of me. He fixes all my injuries right up. That's why the meds aren't working. Naruto said lightheartedly. The damage to your leg is extensive, Naruto. The tenketsu have been destroyed. I don't know what kind of jutsu was used on you, but it burnt and crushed your coils. You won't be able to send any chakra to it, so it's highly unlikely that even your tenant could heal it. I've looked at it, and know for a fact that I can't heal it. Naruto's heart sank. His stomach flipped. His lip trembled. What? He felt like he was going to throw up. The only med nin who would stand a chance is Lady Tsunade, and she hasn't been seen in years. She might not even be able to anymore. Naruto's mind went blank, and he began speaking without thinking. Kakashi, he said as tears began streaming down his cheeks. Tell Jiraiya. I don't care how. I need him to know. I need him. Finally his brain caught up to him. He wiped some tears from his eyes. My giant scroll that I used to carry has a toad summoning scroll in it. If I give you some of my blood you should be able to summon Gamakichi. He can get word to Jiraiya. He looked at Kakashi through tear-filled eyes. Please. Kakashi looked at his sensei's son, the spitting image of both his parents. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He produced a small jar seemingly from nowhere, and pricked a finger on Naruto's good hand. A small amount of blood found its way into the jar. It's leaning against my dresser in my room, Naruto said. Bottom left matrix, can't miss it. He explained solemnly. Kakashi nodded and quickly left, throwing out a hand signal to one of the shadows as he did so. If there's nothing else, Doc, I'd like to sleep. Can you set up the IV? Dr. Yakushi nodded and moved quickly to get it running. Naruto turned to his two teammates. You two should go home. He said quietly. We won't, Hinata said firmly. Briefly it dawned on him how much she had grown in the last year and a half. Completely unrecognizable from the girl he saw sitting shyly in Iruka-sensei's class. I'm serious. You both need your sleep. We won't. It wasn't an argument but a statement. Naruto looked to Sasuke for help, but saw the same look on his face. Fine, but I'm gonna get some sleep. See if maybe I can't talk to the damn fox and see if he can help. Naruto said, and laid his head down on his pillow. There was no dreams, no Kyuubi to talk to. Just darkness. 1 week after the preliminaries. Jiraiya still hadn't arrived. Naruto was beginning to worry about his adoptive father more than he was worrying about himself. Kichi had said that he delivered the message, and that Jiraiya had immediately taken off, not even bothering to pack up his camp. That was as unlike him as it got, as carefree as he often acted. Doing the little things right was something Jiraiya always insisted on. He'd been far away, deep in lightning country. A 5 days journey if he pushed it, perhaps 6 if he had to be cautious at the border. Lightning was the most militarized of the 5 nations. It could be possible that Jiraiya had slipped up in his haste to return. If he was arrested or worse, it would be Naruto's fault. The blonde wasn't sure he could handle that on top of everything else. He was adjusting. His hand had mostly healed, but he couldn't send chakra to it. His leg was another story. He didn't really understand the technical aspects of what the doctors told him, but he did know that they couldn't heal it any better than what it was already at. That left him on crutches. He completed rehab in record time, according to the specialist. Today was supposed to be his last full day in the hospital. Teams 8 and 10 came to visit him every day, and Team 9, with Neji, had even stopped by once. Ino often brought flowers, choji snacks, and Shikamaru even tried to play him in shogi, though that hadn't gone well. Shino's quiet presence was nice. Sakura seemed extremely worried for him, and Kiba brought Akamaru. He was glad to have people that he was close to that cared about him. He was pissed that they were all pitying him. Hinata and Sasuke were the only two that didn't. After her initial outburst and slap, had rarely left Naruto's side. She was gone a few hours a day for training, but she ate her meals with him, and didn't seem to do anything else. Sasuke wasn't much different, though he seemed angrier and more uptight than usual. He also spent a significantly larger amount of time training. Apparently Kakashi had been taking him up into the mountains for some special training. Sasuke didn't seem much like he wanted to talk, so Naruto didn't pry for now. He would see the fruits of his friend's labor soon enough. The Uchiha would stumble into his room at the end of the day covered in dust, shirt occasionally showing scorch marks. He'd plop down and eat his bento box, never uttering more than a grunt. Naruto tried to engage him in conversation, tried to get him to talk, but every sentence was short. It often ended in him rolling his eyes and talking to Hinata instead. He tried to show everybody that he was okay, that the injury wasn't getting him to down. He was still Naruto, he insisted. He would still find a way to be Hokage. They all smiled at him and nodded, but he knew the truth. They all thought he was done for, and he wasn't so sure that he disagreed with them anymore. A rustle by his window startled him out of his wallowing. His sensory ability had seen a huge decline since Orochimaru messed with his seal. He'd been doing research on it, but books were hard to come by in the hospital. Everybody just wanted him to rest. The window began to slide open, which wasn't entirely unusual. Sasuke hated hospitals and most people, so he tended to avoid using the more traditional methods of entrance. The shifting sound of sand chilled his blood. It was fairly dark out, and his room light was off, but he knew exactly who was entering his room. "What do you want?" Naruto said. Cold, detached, and entirely unlike him. He was being extremely cautious. He definitely couldn't fight the sand shinobi in his current state, but if he tried to alert an Anbu or hospital staff, he might set the boy off. The last thing that could happen was an unstable Jinchuuriki in a hospital. He tried to remain calm on the outside. Internally, though, he was scared. He was angry that he was scared, but that didn't change the fact that he was. This was the guy who had crushed him, both emotionally and physically. He must be coming back to finish the job. Naruto had to find a way to alert the Anbu that should be nearby. He took a deep breath and looked Gaara in the eye, not backing down. "I wish to know," Gaara monotoned out. "Why do they not fear you?" Naruto was caught off guard by the question, but he stayed tensed nonetheless. "What do you mean? Who?" Gaara looked confused. His facial expressions were hard to read. It became clear to Naruto that he wasn't used to showing many emotions. Perhaps he'd never dealt with them before. "The other leaf shinobi. They do not fear you like the sand fear me." "Why?" Naruto was somewhat confused himself, caught between fear of the ninja who had crushed his bones and dreams, and anger at the audacity to come in here and ask him questions as if he'd done nothing wrong. "Look, if you think you're just gonna waltz in here and ask me questions after trying to kill me, you got another thing coming, pal." Gaara tilted his head ever so slightly and questioned. "I just wish to know why they don't run from you. Why they tried to protect you from it." Naruto was confused now. He clearly said it, as if he weren't the one that had attacked him. "They're my comrades. My family." He started leaking chakra slowly, hoping the emotion he portrayed would hide the call for help. "They jumped in to protect me because they know without a doubt that I would do the same, and more, for them." "They do not see you as a monster?" Gaara asked. His tone this time was almost innocent. Naruto was now extremely confused, and risked losing some more chakra. "You mean because I made Jinchuuriki?" "Not anymore, no. It took a lot of work though. Some still don't care for me," he said quietly. "How did you do it?" Gaara asked. Naruto was thrown by that. He thought about how to best explain it, slowing turning up his chakra output as he did so. He never got to answer though. Gaara, who had been standing there quietly, suddenly doubled over in pain, holding his head. When he looked up, the lonely emptiness that was in his eyes before was gone, replaced by psychotic glint. "Mo!" Gaara started to shout, but cut himself off with a grunt and a scream, and Naruto flared his chakra sharply. "Mother wants your blood." The sand shinobi finally ground out. Naruto trembled slightly. He couldn't use any jutsu at the moment because his right arm wasn't working, and he hadn't got that jutsu to work without seals yet. Sand rose up, nearly vibrating in its anticipation of an attack. Before the sand could attack him, Naruto built up as much chakra as fast as he could, and blew it out of his left hand in the form of wind. A powerful gust cut through the air, Gaara's sand rising up to block it. While the sand blocked his sight, Naruto flipped himself out of bed, moving towards the window to try and throw himself out. He was already broken, it's not like a 2-story fall could make him much worse. Sand rushed in front of him, cutting him off, and he swore. He hobbled back towards the bed, trying to give himself some space. The sand crept it. He silently lamented himself for forcing his teammates to spend a night at their homes, since he would be getting out of the hospital the next day anyway. Gaara looked crazed, almost like he was fighting himself as much as he was Naruto. The sand continued to creep forward, but hadn't launched an attack yet. The red-headed shinobi finally let loose another scream, and the sand launched itself at Naruto. Suddenly, he found himself flying through the air, hospital bed not too far behind him. When he finally landed in the corner, there was a figure in front of him. Sasuke was there. He didn't know how, and he didn't care why. He was just happy to see his friend. Where is the Anbu? He ground out. He was pissed. Dunno. Tried to alert them. They should have been here by now. Sasuke and Gaara stared at each other, each daring the other to make the first move. Gaara's sand hovered and quivered, Sasuke's fingers twitched. Just like that it was over. Gaara's sand whirled and then dropped. He was nowhere to be seen. Not a half second later, 3 Anbu backed to a halt in the room. What happened here? One of them asked. You would know if you showed up on time. Sasuke lashed out at them. Naruto saw his face for the first time. There were black marks, not entirely unlike seals, stretching from his neck up to the right side of his face. Even as he noticed them, they were retracting. He wasn't even sure he'd seen it right. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. There was an incident. We were the closest Anbu on call. Tell us what happened here. Sasuke looked like he was about to explode and attack the nearest Anbu, but Naruto laid a hand on his shoulder. It's all right, Sasuke. I'm fine, thanks to you. Sasuke didn't look like he wanted to drop it, but the look in Naruto's eyes told him there was more to it than what he stumbled in on. He let it go, and Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. With some help, he got his bed turned over, and then plopped down on his, finally relaxing. He and Sasuke explained to the Anbu what happened. After a thorough examination, they left the room, but promised at least one of them would be outside the door and the window the rest of the night. He and Sasuke didn't talk the rest of the night, but the Uchiha never left the room. If Naruto's suspicions were right, and they rarely weren't when it came to his intense best friend, Sasuke didn't sleep the whole night either. 3 weeks after the preliminaries. Jiraiya still wasn't back. Naruto was worried, pissed, upset, and dismayed. After the initial week, he sent Jiraiya another message through their summoning contract. All he'd received back was a short note. Be home as fast as I can. Have a plan. Hold tight. That was close to 2 weeks ago now, and Naruto was so going to kill the pervy sage when he got back. Once getting out of the hospital, he distracted himself as best he could. Researching seals and practicing writing with his left hand since his right was so shaky. Chakra control exercises. Helping his 2 teammates training for the finals. Anything he could to fill the void that he was feeling in his soul right now. It wasn't enough. He could almost perform his newest jutsu with just his left hand, but he wasn't quite there yet. Not that it would do him any good when he couldn't walk, let alone run. He found ways to be of use to his village in his now ample free time. Making exploding and barrier tags, helping comrades train, he even took a D rank to help clean the academy storage room. He had nearly failed it. He needed Jiraiya and whatever ridiculous plan he had concocted. And fast. The southlands of Kusagakure. Jiraiya had been traveling and gathering information almost literally non-stop since Gamakichi appeared in front of him. The last time he'd had this little sleep for this long of a time was the Third Great Ninja War. At least then he had been confident in his abilities. He was no slouch as a spy, but tracking really wasn't his forte, despite how well he knew his target. He'd been hot on her trail early, and then it had gone ice cold one night while he slept. He must have spooked her. Now he had to double down on caution, which meant he slept even less. His informants and tracking had brought him to a tourist town in the southern part of Kusagakure. Even for how reckless she'd been in her life, wedging herself between Omegakure and Iwagakure was stupid. Even more caution he had to exercise. He couldn't help Naruto if it was in Hizuka Castle. He didn't strictly have permission to be crossing borders the way he was, seeing as he hadn't actually asked for it. There was no time though, Naruto needed him. He strolled into Gambling Hall, one of the smaller ones that she was known to donate her money to. He asked about her, gesturing to his hair and chest while describing her. On a different day, he'd laugh at what he was doing. Today he was all business. They directed him to a bar, no surprises there. He thanked them with a few extra bills thrown their way, enough to please them but not enough to arouse suspicion, and moved on. The bar led to another bar, which led to a gambling hall, this time a larger one. They directed him towards yet another bar. That was where he found her. He moved as calmly as possible and slid into the booth she was sitting at. It was Tsunade who spoke first. Wow, she exclaimed through her slur. This one looked just like a civilian. Which one do you think Sarutobi sent after me this time, huh Shizune? How far do you think I can throw him? Jiraiya rolled his eyes. Sensei didn't send me, Tsunade, he said, letting his henge melt off of him. Brown hair turned white and grew in length. A round face turned broad and sharp. Red lines appeared on his cheeks, and a horned headband on his forehead. Sunday, despite clearly being drunk, reacted sharply. I'm not doing back, she said. I don't care what he needs. He didn't send me, Tsunade. He let the tight hold on his chakra loosen slightly as she turned her head. Listen to me. A few heads turned their way, but Jiraiya lazily waved them off, holding up a bottle of sake as an excuse. What do you want? She asked. I need your help. There's a genin, he's hurt and you might be the only one that can heal him. Why does a genin need my help? Can't the hospital just handle it? Jiraiya strained to tell her the full truth, but he had to be careful so close to Iwa. There could be spies anywhere. I've taken an interest in him, trained him quite a bit. He was injured in the Chunin exams. A genin wielding sand crushed his leg. He hinted. Tsunade seemed to understand that code at least. What was he doing fighting one of them? He should have just forfeited. The vein on Jiraiya's neck nearly exploded. Let's head back to your room. I insist. When she didn't oblige, his voice became so sharp it could cut rocks. Now, he couldn't risk loosening his chakra anymore, or he'd surely be discovered. He reseated his henge, feeling for imperfections, then got up out of the booth. Tsunade couldn't recall a time she'd seen Jiraiya so upset. Upset wasn't the right word. Enraged was better. Come, Shizune, let's see what he has to say, she said cautiously. When they arrived at the room, Jiraiya immediately went to work laying down seals. A privacy barrier, sound and chakra dampening. She saw the full works. She took a moment to use medical ninjutsu to clear the alcohol's effects out of her system. The moment Jiraiya finished with the last of the seals, he let his chakra free. A pressure rained down on the room that made it hard to stand. The pig in Shizune's arms squealed. He's his son, Tsunade. That's why you need to heal him. Who is? Whose son? She questioned. The genin, Naruto. He's Minato's son, my godson, and I've raised him since he was 7. And I don't know why he was fighting a goddamn Jinchuuriki in the Chunin exams, but he needs my help. Tears began streaming down his cheeks, smearing his red paint. He needs your help. Please, he begged. He was huffing and puffing, trying to catch his breath. Sunday knew one thing. She'd never seen him like this before. She'd hardly ever seen anybody like this. He was desperate, that much was clear. What's wrong with him? She asked. Strictly business. Her demeanor seemed to calm him down, if only some. He took a deep breath to try and center himself. I don't know. He got his leg and arm crushed by the sand. They apparently can't heal it. He can't walk without crutches or do ninjutsu anymore. I haven't seen him. I was on a mission when I found out and came straight for you. You abandoned a mission? She gasped. Yeah, I know. He chuckled without humor. First time since that damn Inuzuka dog when we were genin. He sniffled. Sensei left me tied to that damn post all night. She would go then, she'd already been convinced. I won't stay. I'm not asking you to. Tsunadeheim, please. Fine, she huffed. We can leave first thing tomorrow. I want to gamble some more tonight. I'll pay all the debtors in this town that you owe if we leave today. Jiraiya said, holding up his checkbook. He's been on crutches for 3 weeks. I don't want to waste any time. Jiraiya didn't wait for a response. He rushed out of the room with a, start packing, tossed over his shoulder. Tsunade could only shake her head in response. A small smirk found its way onto her lips. She was dreading the return to the village, but she would be lying if she said she didn't want to see who was causing Jiraiya to act like this. It was only an hour before they were on the road. She had an odd feeling heading back to her former home. Maybe it would be good just to stop by for a bit. Chapter 21. The Third Sannin. Tsunade pursed her lips as she finished up her examination of Konoha's Jinchuuriki. She allowed her mind to wander briefly as the hard part of her job was over. Walking through the gates of the village had been hard. Rather, forcing herself to walk through had been hard. Actually being inside of the village wasn't as difficult as she had thought it would be. Jiraiya dragged her straight to the hospital, so she hadn't seen any of the places that would drag up the bad memories. Still, she had been pleasantly apathetic to her return. The henge that kept people from recognizing her had helped too. She wasn't ready to be welcomed back. Not when she'd be turning around as soon as the genin in front of her was healed. Well? Jiraiya broke her train of thought. She dropped her stethoscope around her neck, and took a step back. She picked up the chart again and briefly flipped through it. It's not good, Jiraiya. What? Naruto asked from his seat on the table. What do you mean it's not good? His lip was trembling. He'd been so excited when Jiraiya returned with his old teammate, supposedly the only person that could heal him. Kid, the damage is bad. Your chakra system below the injury line is completely destroyed. Restoring injuries of that nature is a mess. Even I haven't done it successfully yet. I don't care, Naruto said. His hands gripped the sides of the table, the leather cover on it creaking under his hands. I want to do it. You could become completely paralyzed, you could lose all ability to use chakra. Worst case scenario, you die. I don't care. You have to do it. I'm not going to let you die, Tsunade said, crossing her arms under her chest. Take what you can get. I can heal the leg so you walk, but that's it. Naruto put his head down, clenching his jaw. His whole body began to shake. Jiraiya tried to bridge the gap to them. Tsunade, maybe, no. Naruto said quietly. We will do the surgery. I won't lose my ability to use chakra, and I won't die. He looked up at Tsunade with tears in his blue eyes, staring into her brown ones. Not until I become Hokage. Tsunade gasped. For a brief moment she saw the ghost of her younger brother, and her former lover standing over the blonde's shoulders. There are too many people counting on me. I can't fail. I have to protect my loved ones. That's my ninja way. There was a determination in his voice that Tsunade had rarely seen or heard. The memories of her own lost loved ones weighed heavy on her. It was a truly honorable way to live life. She wanted to root for Naruto, she really did. It would be best to hammer it into his thick skull now though. Wanting and hoping to protect your loved ones won't stop them from dying. Brat, she said. The bite in her tone was gone. It almost sounded like she was being forced to speak. The world is a cruel place. Beyond these walls it's dark and cold, and it doesn't look kindly upon anybody. If you're unlucky enough to survive as long as I have, you will get unlucky. You will believe in people who let you down. And worst of all, just when things are looking like you might get a happily ever after. A tear leaked down her left cheek, but she wiped it away quickly, keeping her tone even. This world will stomp all over it, and you'll lose those that you love. Naruto was quiet for a few seconds, taking in what she had said. He knew her story, or at least the gist of it, from Jiraiya. Honestly, it was hard for the old pervert to shut up about her once he got going. He looked down at his own hands, seemingly contemplating their existence, studying the lines on his palms. The faint chakra burns on his left palm. The calluses and scars from kunai and shuriken on his right. Then he clenched them, so tight and forceful that the skin around his knuckles creaked. His hand snapped up, eyes blazing with a fire seldom seen. You think that losing your loved ones means you give up? You think that's what they would want? His voice was slowly gaining volume and intensity as he spoke. You think my parents think I should just stop trying? They died so that I would have the opportunity to protect those I love. The village that I love. They entrusted everything to me. He rose to his full height on his one good leg, spiky hair barely coming above her breast as it shook. Losing those you love doesn't mean you give up. It means you have to try that much harder for those that you still have. He was breathing heavily now, and his chakra was stirring tumultuously. Restlessly. Tsunade's eyes had long since opened wide in surprise. The kid was wise beyond his years it seemed, but she had experience that he didn't. She had felt the pain. Held Dan in her arms as he bled to death. Hadn't even been able to look upon the mangled corpse of her little brother. She knew the pain. Naruto, do you see this necklace? She retrieved it from between her chest, holding it up in an open palm for him to see. It was my grandfather's, forged from his chakra. When he passed it down to my mother, he said it symbolized his will of fire. His will to protect the village. I gave it to my brother when he was about your age. A genin. He wanted to become Hokage and protect the village, just like Granddad. He died the next day. Simple carrier mission gone wrong. Naruto looked like he wanted to respond, but Tsunade held her hand up. Just listen. I was crushed. Broken over it even. I lobbied Sensei to have more medic nin trained. I thought maybe if there was a real medic there he might have survived. That was how I met Dan. He saw it the same as I, and like my brother, he had a dream of being Hokage. Over time, I healed, little by little. I gave Dan the necklace, entrusting my grandfather's will to him too. He died in my arms the next day. It was like the universe said, you think more med nin will help? Well, not even you can save him. She shook her head, trying to fight back tears. So just take it from me, kid. You can be the greatest ever at what you do, and it still won't be enough. It's better to just give up on all that now. Become a tea shop owner or farmer or something. It'll save you a lot of pain, she said sullenly. Throughout her speech, Jiraiya saw the emotion progressively slip from Naruto's face. It had been a long time since he'd seen that look. He used to turn to it when Jiraiya would broach the touchier subjects in their early days together. This wasn't that though. This was like the time when Jiraiya had eaten Naruto's ramen stash when he drank too much sake in one of the towns, then tried to tell him it was just ramen. He hoped the hospital structure had passed its most recent inspection. Slowly, Naruto's face began to betray his emotions. He'd been suppressing it, but the signs had still shown. Squeezing the chair, raising his voice, loosening his hold on his chakra. Smaller things, at least for a soon-to-be 13-year-old. Now there was rage written across his features, and a smattering of what looked to be betrayal. Jiraiya was beginning to wonder if it was safe for him to be here. Naruto's temper could rage, but Tsunade's kid and would surpass his. The genin's next words would have to be chosen carefully. You have no right to talk down on my dreams, just because you've given up on yours. His tone was cold as ice, shaking slightly in his attempt to keep his cool. You have no right to wear that necklace and what it stands for. Not while talking like this. Your brother and Dan are probably rolling over in their graves right now. Jiraiya's eyes widened. Those were not the right words. They were fucked. He was on Naruto's side. Always. But this time it was really going to suck, because Tsunade was going to try and kill one of them. Tsunade, to her credit, didn't explode immediately and destroy the room. She balled her hands into fists, squeezing so hard they shook. You think the necklace is so great? You think you deserve the necklace more than me? You want the fucking necklace? Come and get it, you little brat. She yelled, before whispering her last words. Outside. Now. This was bad. Jiraiya had seen Tsunade angry many times, usually his fault, but the only time she'd been this mad he'd nearly died. That was also the last time he ever peeped on her in the baths. He tried to slow her down as she led them to a training ground, leaving cracks in the ground as she stomped her way there. Tsunade, come on now, he's just a kid, he doesn't know any better. He pleaded, striding by her side to keep up. Naruto, to his credit, was only a few steps behind. He had gotten pretty agile on his crutches. Tsunade took a blind swipe at Jiraiya's head, one he nimbly dodged. She let out a grunt in frustration as she felt her fist barely swipe some of her teammates' hair. He's gotta learn the lesson sooner or later, Jiraiya. She huffed, might as well learn it right now, and who better to learn it from than me. She smiled humorlessly. They reached the training ground, and a memory nearly assaulted her. She hadn't had a place in mind, but her feet had brought her to where Sarutobi-sensei had given them the bell test. There was the stump Jiraiya had been tied to. Over there was where Orochimaru had mastered sensei's signature jutsu on his first go. And there, behind it all, lay the memorial stone. Its kunai shape jutting out of the ground cruelly. Dan's name was on there. So was Nawaki's, her grandfather, her great-uncle, nearly everybody she had loved. She was frozen in time, lost in her memories for a moment. Naruto's voice brought her out of it. What's the matter, Granny? Having second thoughts? He taunted. Just like that she was snapped back to reality. She spun on her heel and spoke. Listen here, brat. You land a single blow on me, and this necklace is yours. If you have a death wish, that's fine by me. You won't be able to though, because no matter how hard you try, there are things in this world you just can't do. One of those things for you is beat me. One blow, and I'll even spot you. I bet you that I can stop you with one finger. She held up her index to emphasize the point. Off to the side, Jiraiya cringed. TCH. Naruto said, borrowing from Sasuke's vocabulary. Gonna take a lot more than a finger to put me down, Granny. Tsunade turned red in anger at the slight on her age. You'll see. He whispered more to himself than her. Naruto tossed the crutch in his left hand to Jiraiya. He couldn't use any chakra if his one good hand was occupied. He lined up across from Tsunade, the only Sannin he hadn't faced yet. He was 0 halves all time, but that just meant things could only go up from here. Jiraiya made a few comments about not having to do this, both of which were ignored by both of them. Finally, he gave in and raised his hand to start the fight. It dropped hesitantly. Tsunade didn't move. If the brat wanted the necklace, he could come get it. Sure, it was a little cruel to make him do the moving considering the state he was in, but that was the whole point, wasn't it? Naruto lazily popped a few kunai from storage scrolls plastered on his side. He might not be able to make hand signs with his right hand, or bear weight on his right leg, but he had a few tricks left still. And one very powerful jutsu. He hoped. He transferred the kunai to his right hand, and formed a half-ram seal with his left. He took a big breath of air, and molded his chakra. Since the seal had been placed on him, his chakra control had been erratic. Luckily, chakra control could be trained, and he hadn't had much else to do lately. It wasn't as good as before, but it wasn't as much of a struggle as it was during the preliminaries either. His chakra condensed, feeling the flow and rhythm of it, the swirl in his gut. He spat out a wave of water between him and the Sannin, letting it fan out as much as possible. It wouldn't be powerful enough to make her move anyway. He flung the 3 kunai with his right hand, and used a burst of wind chakra from his left to give them speed. And then he charged chakra into his good leg and moved. Tsunade was surprised when the little brat spit out enough water to put a chunin down for the day with nothing but half a hand sign. It lacked power and control, but it was impressive nonetheless. Clearly a diversion, however, so she readied herself. 2 kunai spit through the water, moving unnaturally through the air. She dodged them with a wide berth. She felt the ripple of the wind they made as they passed by. Did he use wind chakra to propel them? 2 chakra natures? Her surprise was interrupted by another. The boy had lunged to her left, around the edge of his water jutsu. It was a peculiar thing watching someone so young move so fast on one leg. He planted, clearly using chakra to enhance his strength and speed, turned and leapt towards her. His speed was impressive, but nothing for her to worry about whatsoever. Another kunai made its way to his right hand as he came through the air. He flung it at her, and cocked his left hand back like he was going to boost it with chakra again. The kunai was going to miss to the right of her head. No issue. Then her senses screamed at her, the 6th sense honed through hundreds of fights and battles and war. She looked up in time to see a kunai falling from the sky, aimed for the left side of her head. It was going to reach her first. She leaned out of the way, straight into the oncoming path of the other kunai. She wouldn't have time to safely dodge, not while off balance. Instead, she reached out with her index finger, intending on deflecting the kunai with it. This time, there was a literal scream to accompany her senses. The scream of chakra grinding. As Naruto flew at Tsunade and let loose his kunai throw, he knew he'd timed it just right. His one chance. He cocked his left hand back, almost as if he was going to push the kunai with his chakra. Hopefully she'd picked up on the wind earlier. He couldn't be sure because the water had blocked his view of her reaction. He saw her begin to dodge to her right, his left, and he knew he had her. If only he could hold the jutsu long enough. He focused with all he had, flying through the air as he was. Chakra began to swirl in his hand, forming a ball. It span quickly into a shaky ball, leaving a screaming sound behind him as he moved. His eyes picked up on Tsunade using her finger to deflect the kunai. She'd never be able to block him in time. Time seemed to slow down for him as he approached her. He saw her eyes go wide. He willed the jutsu to hold together. He'd been practicing and practicing. If he couldn't do jutsu with hand signs, then he'd master jutsu that didn't need them. Just before he landed, he planted the crutch in the ground, allowing him to pivot around it. It gave him just enough leverage to do so before it snapped. Good. He hated those things anyway. He let loose a scream as his left hand came down on her. Rasengan. The swirling orb of chakra began to destabilize as it reached her, but it didn't matter. Before he could make contact with her, his whole body was snapped back. The foot in his gut rocketing him across the training ground, leaving a small channel in the ground as he burrowed across it. He crashed into the training post, coming to a stop. Jiraiya was on him in an instant, checking him over. He wasn't too worried though, the kid was tough as nails, and Tsunade had really held back on that kick. Jiraiya-sensei, he said wearily. I did it, he said. The contentment in his voice lightened Jiraiya's burden quite a bit. Naruto then proceeded to turn over onto his side and throw up, clutching his stomach. Yeah, you did, Naruto. I think you're the only person who could have too. Jiraiya said proudly, patting him on the back. When were you gonna tell me you almost had the Rasengan down? Naruto rolled back over and sat up slowly. It was better before the exams. I could keep it running better. It's not mastered though. Learning jutsu is hard without clones. He lamented. Yeah, welcome to the land of mortals, kid. Tsunade came walking over at that moment, a small look of confusion on her otherwise schooled face. She knelt down, and her hands glowed green. She began to heal the damage she'd just inflicted on Naruto. I told you, Granny. I won't fail, he said, much more timidly than his usual bravado. Tsunade chose to ignore him, and instead berated Jiraiya. What are you doing teaching such a dangerous jutsu to a child? Do you know how dangerous that is? Jiraiya grinned unabashedly. Well, technically Kakashi taught him, but even then he just gave him the tools. Nobody really told him how it works, he figured it out by himself. That's a weak excuse and you know it. He could blow a hand off trying to learn that. I almost did actually, it was pretty cool though. Naruto tossed in. Jiraiya glared at him, trying to silently tell him to shut up. It was too late. Tsunade whipped her head around at him. What the hell are you thinking? Do you realize I could have made your injuries much worse if I'd kicked you harder? You can't leave yourself exposed flying through the air like that. Didn't Jiraiya teach you anything? She was clearly angry, but it sounded oddly like she cared. It was a different tone from before. However, she continued, I was wrong to say the things I said. You clearly have a bright future ahead of you. His voice got real soft. I just don't want anybody to have to go through what I did. A bright future? Naruto questioned. Does that mean you'll do the surgery? Naruto, she said, I don't think you properly understand the risks. Biju chakra was flooded into your limbs. You might have a tolerance to your Biju, but it's still toxic. Your tenketsu and coils are destroyed, and those aren't rebuilt as simply as muscles and bones. She said seriously. I would have run a stent from your chakra core all the way down to both your leg and arm, which means I have to re-break both your arm and your leg. Then I have to run it to your central nervous system. That is dangerous. Each of those are 50-50 at best. You could be paralyzed. You could die. I just can't do it, it's not safe. The sad look on his face almost crushed her. Just take some time and rest. I'll look into it some more. She moved to take her necklace off for him. He'd won after all, when she'd had to kick him. His hand touched her elbow lightly. I don't want it, not yet. If I can't protect my village, then I don't deserve the necklace. He said sadly. She dropped her hands. This kid was something else. She nodded and flickered out of there, intent on doing some research. Jiraiya helped Naruto to his feet, handing him the one good crutch. He didn't really need the second one to walk anymore anyway. Come on kid, let's go to Ichiraku's and you can get me caught up on how the hell you managed 2 Sannin and a Jinchuuriki in the same month. Naruto snorted in return. The ridiculousness of the statement was not lost on him. Actually, he returned, I think technically it's been 29 days since you last sparred with us, so it's all 3 Sannin, a Jinchuuriki, and I almost got in a fight with Gigi. He said, oh you've got to tell me that story. Jiraiya said, laying an arm around Naruto's shoulders with a chuckle. Naruto let loose a soft one of his own as they walked. There wasn't a lot of joy in it, but there was more than there'd been in the last couple of weeks. Shizune found her in the hospital of all places. She wasn't near any of the blood upstairs of course, but still, coming to the archives and research floor was a big step for her. She'd been happy to be able to run off and catch up with friends for the first time in she didn't know how many years. 3 if she was counting right, since the last time Tsunade had let her leave to visit the village. After lunch with friends, she'd gone and gotten them a hotel room, knowing Tsunade wouldn't want to spend her time in the Senju compound where the memories would be plentiful and painful. She then went to find her master, checking all the bars and gambling halls she knew of. Oddly enough she didn't find her in any of them. It wasn't until she saw Jiraiya's white hair hanging off a stool that she had any luck. She went up to him, introducing herself and taunted to Naruto in the process, and then inquired to Jiraiya. Jiraiya thought for a second, and then directed her to the hospital, saying she said she was going to look into Naruto's case some more. That was a shock to Shizune, and she hadn't really expected to find her there. But there she was, twin blonde tails of her hanging down her back as she hunched over a large book. She didn't even look up when Shizune entered. Most shockingly was the lack of any visual or olfactory evidence of alcohol. She was sober. Tsunade looked up, a focused look on her face, and saw Shizune. Oh good, you're here. Grab the book on coil regeneration in the corner. I want to see what's been updated since I was last in a hospital. Without awaiting a response, she turned back to her book, intently reading. As Shizune set her pig down, a younger lady in a lab coat strutted through the doors. Here's the file you requested, Tsunade-sama. The assistant said. Tsunade pointed to an empty space on the table without looking up. The assistant placed the folder down, before bowing and exiting. Shizune smiled. It was good to see her back to work. She walked over to the book, and pulled it out. They got to work. Naruto found himself on the same examination table he'd last been on, 3 days after the fact. He'd been down the last few days, but Jiraiya being around had helped. He kept practicing, knowing it was good for him, but also a good distraction. He almost was able to form one of his chakra chains now. The Rasengan hadn't improved though. Tsunade strutted in, looking for all the world like a new woman. She wore a white coat, and had a concentrated look on her face. Most importantly, she moved with a purpose. Naruto almost smiled seeing her. Here's the deal, she said. There's been some medical advancements. Shizune and I have worked day and night to come up with a new treatment. She held a hand up to curb Naruto's enthusiasm. It's safer. Less risk of permanent damage, however. She waited till Naruto's full attention was on her. It will probably be extremely painful. We'll have to graft on stem cells and connect them to your existing coils. Naruto didn't seem to understand what that meant, so she continued to explain. It will almost be like an organ transplant. The success rate is much higher, but there's 2 issues. She held up a finger sharply. 1. Because it's like a transplant, if your body rejects the tissue, your own chakra will essentially turn on you, and you will most likely die. Naruto was steadfastly staring at her, so she continued. She held up a second finger. 2. We don't know how the Kyuubi's chakra will react. I understand that Orochimaru messed with your seal so you can't access the fox's chakra, and Sensei decided to leave it that way, for fear of what it might do to your injuries. Naruto nodded. It will have to stay that way until it's completely healed and integrated. That could take up to a year by my estimates. The Kyuubi could theoretically heal it and integrate it much faster, but there's far too many variables to consider that an option. That means chakra control won't be improved during that time. Naruto nodded slowly, taking it all in. So, she said, do you still want to go ahead with it? Naruto looked at Jiraiya. It's your decision, kid. You've been given all the information possible. Keep a level head and assess the situation. I'll go along with whatever you decide. Naruto nodded again, more firmly this time. He turned to Tsunade. Alright, Granny, let's do this. Tsunade scoffed at the nickname, but ignored it otherwise. I thought you might say that. Surgery is tomorrow at noon. The surgery itself isn't that intensive, though your arm and leg will still have to be fractured, so you'll be out of the hospital in time to watch your friends in the Chunin exams. Your pink-haired friend told me that would be of utmost importance to you. Naruto shot a blinding smile at Tsunade. Sakura knew him too well, and of course she'd ran into Tsunade in the hospital, and of course she'd spoken her mind about Naruto. She was a good friend to have. And Naruto, she added. Just because it might work doesn't mean things will be the same. Your jutsu might not be as strong. Your chakra might not flow as smoothly. She said, I would tell you not to get your hopes up, but I'm beginning to understand you'll just take that as a challenge. He grinned again. You got that right, Granny. Naruto Uzumaki is gonna become Hokage no matter what, just you watch. I'll have the Rasengan mastered and surpass you in no time, ya know. She rolled her eyes at the boy, but couldn't hide the smirk that appeared after she turned to leave from Shizune. Her student herself sported a big smile, as did Jiraiya. The blonde firecracker is infectious, that's for sure. 8 hours and 29 minutes after losing consciousness, Naruto Uzumaki awoke in a hospital room. His arm was once again in a cast, and his leg had been given a new one. He couldn't pay that much attention to it though, because despite the dark hour, and the big event tomorrow, his room was full. 11 genin, his comrades were in the room. The 3 Jonin sensei and Kakashi were also there, a step behind their students. Jiraiya's burly frame filled the corner of his vision. Tsunade took a majority of it centered in front of him. The operation went off without a hitch, Naruto. She said, a small amount of warmth leaking into her voice. Now, we play the waiting game. You have a standing reservation at noon here every single day. They'll give you the details when you're discharged." Most of the room cheered in happiness. Naruto couldn't help but smile along with them. Even Neji looked like the stick wasn't quite so far up his butt today. "Thank you, Granny Tsunade. I mean it." And he did. He was extremely grateful to her. "Thank you for going out of your way to do this. I promise I won't let it go to waste." He turned to his fellow genin. "Thank you all for being here. I can't wait to watch you fight tomorrow and get back out there with you guys. You should go home though and get some rest." After a few weak arguments, they all began to file out of the hospital room and head to their respective homes. Sasuke and Hinata were the last two to leave, bidding him goodbye with a hug and a wave respectively. He was worried about them. He knew Hinata would be alright in her fight. She had plenty of experience with fighting against wind jutsu after all. Sasuke though was another story. He trusted his teammate, but Gaara was a different beast. He was brought out of his thoughts by Tsunade. "Remember, kid, it's going to take a while for you to heal from the surgery. You're on crutches until I clear you. Don't try and push it." "I mean it." Naruto nodded at her enthusiastically. "Don't worry, Granny. I won't. Whether it's 2 months or a year, I'll make sure to do it properly." He responded contently. A comfortable silence hung in the air between them. To the side, Jiraiya sat in a chair happily smiling, Shizune doing the same. An idea popped into Naruto's head, and he perked up. "Would you and Shizune like to sit with Jiraiya-sensei and I tomorrow? We got great seats." Tsunade smiled softly at the boy, his enthusiasm overriding the voice in her head telling her to shut herself in and down a bottle of sake. "Sure, Naruto. We would be happy to. We can leave straight from here since you won't be discharged until tomorrow anyway," she said. Not even the fact that he'd have to stay overnight in one of his least favorite places could put him down at this point. He sat back in his bed, feeling cozy for the first time in quite a while. His dream wasn't over. He could still become Hokage. He could still protect his loved ones. The Sannin and Shizune left him so that he could rest, and he slept soundlessly. Everything would be alright. Chapter 22. A Genius and a Failure. Naruto awoke at first light. His excitement to see his friends get to fight and earn praise from the entire village was too much for him to sleep properly. He knew how much they had all grown, now the village would too. Some of them would even be Chunin by this time next week. He smiled sadly. He wouldn't be one of them, but that wasn't the end of the world. He would catch up to his friends soon enough. While he waited, he practiced some chakra control exercises. It might not do him all that much good now, but hopefully it would sharpen his skills when the 5-prong seal was finally released. That wasn't the only reason he was excited for it though. The fox might have been a miserable bastard full of hate, and constantly angry, but Naruto was really beginning to miss him. He wasn't as lonely as he once was when he was little, but the Kyuubi was always someone he could talk to. Always there to keep him company. Not that the fox had a choice, but he could continue to ignore him if he really wanted to. As the hours droned on, he practiced his left-handed writing some more. The one thing he could currently do at full proficiency was make good old-fashioned handwritten seals. He'd been working on a design for a few weeks now, and he hoped it would work as intended. A doctor and 2 different nurses checked on him while he was waiting, scolding him for using chakra. He just smiled at them and rubbed the back of his head, pausing until they left. He was restless though. Hinata and Sasuke visited them several hours before noon, possibly even before they ate breakfast. He lit up when he saw them, excited to wish his friends luck and give them gifts. Naturally they were seals. They both thanked him, though he had a suspicion that neither would use them. Sasuke had always been one to rely on his own power, and Hinata had blossomed into a fairly independent fighter. She would want to prove to her family that she didn't need help. Still though, it eased his mind knowing that they had them just in case. Their time visiting him was short, and he wished them luck, saying he knew they could do it. Before Sasuke could leave though, Naruto shot him a weary look. "Careful." Sasuke shot him a deadpanned look. "I'll be fine." And then an ever so small smirk. "I've got an ace up my sleeve." Naruto knew what the ace was, but he couldn't help but worry at least a little bit. Half an hour before the fights were to start, Tsunade finally showed up, Jiraiya and Shizune in tow, the latter holding Taunton. "Geez, I know you guys are old, but did you really have to take so long to get here?" he teased. "I don't want to miss any of the fights. You know, Naruto. Jiraiya said, knowingly. You better watch your mouth around Tsunade. He leaned forward to whisper to his charge. She's real sensitive about her age. Naruto giggled as Tsunade's softly hammer punched Jiraiya into the ground. Only the fact that they were in the hospital saved him from her using her real power. Still young enough to crush both of you into a paste, thank you very much. She said, come on, brat. Let's get going, I got some bets to place. You'd be smart to place them on Sasuke, ya know. Naruto said. He's definitely the strongest one left. Naruto said, subtly implying that he thought he was the strongest. TCH. He's the last Uchiha, everybody will be betting on him. The odds will be awful. Well then Hinata is your next best bet. She's going against the Cage's daughter, and she gets overlooked by Neji, the grumpy bastard, so she should have good odds. Naruto said excitedly. He wasn't allowed to bet since he was teammates with contestants, but he knew exactly who he would be betting on if he could, despite his worries. She's that good, huh? A Hyuga against a wind user isn't a favorable matchup. Tsunade mused as Naruto made his way out of bed and onto his crutches. Oh, she's incredible. She's beaten me before when I was only allowed to use elemental jutsu, so she should be able to handle Temari no problem. He said, well maybe I will place a bet on her then, since you seem so sure of your little girlfriend. Haha, that's my boy. Jiraiya interjected with an eyebrow waggle and a slap on the back. Naruto put on his best pouty face, hoping it would be enough to get the older shinobi to stop using that line. She's not my girlfriend, she's my teammate. He brightened with a big smile. She's family. And she's gonna kick some ass today, ya know. He wouldn't let their teasing get him down. Today was going to be a great day. They made their way into the arena, causing an unfortunate amount of ruckus. Word had, naturally, spread about Tsunade's return to the village. Her henge to sneak into the village had worked, but when she'd seen the state of the hospital, she declared that no medic in their right mind could leave this shit show without fixing it first. Though Naruto thought that maybe she just enjoyed bossing people around. They found their seats in the front row, and Naruto waved to the others in his year that hadn't passed the preliminaries. Sakura and Ino looked excited to see him, and he idly noted the bruises and scratches that, combined with the dirt all over them, showed they'd been training. He'd seen Sakura during his time in the hospital, so he knew that she had already been undergoing at least light training as a med nin. It was something that seemed to suit her well, but still, he was glad to see they weren't afraid to get their hands dirty either. Shikamaru lazily threw a hand up at him to wave, which he energetically returned. Choji, being Choji, offered him a potato chip. Naruto, being Naruto, accepted the offer graciously and commented on how delicious it was. Choji beamed at him, happy to share his joy. Ten was the final member of the group. She was much more subdued in her greeting, perhaps feeling the odd one out, not being in their graduating class. That changed when she saw who was accompanying Naruto. When she saw Tsunade, she flushed bright pink, and nervously stumbled over herself. Naruto smirked. It wouldn't be long until she saw the other side of her hero. They finally got settled in, the genin to Naruto's left. Jiraiya, then Tsunade and Shizune filled out to his right. He didn't quite feel whole, though how could he when his team was in the arena without him? He was content though. He didn't need to be the one in front of the roaring crowd, showing off his skills. His people were surrounding him. He was acknowledged. He was home. A Jonin named Genma was announcing the rules of the final exam, though he wasn't too sure how well they'd be enforced. When he wrapped up, the genin made their way up to a balcony located one floor down from the spectator seating, cut into the side of the wall. They left only Neji and Rock Lee in the center. This was a fight Naruto had been looking forward to for a while now. He'd run across Team 9 before. It was hard not to when you were so close to Kakashi-sensei, considering Guy was always hot on his tail. He knew a little of the history between the two teammates. He was well aware of Neji's viewpoint on life and fate, given how he was always spewing it when Naruto visited the Hyuga. He also knew Lee's story. How he'd graduated without being able to use ninjutsu or genjutsu of any form. How he could only use taijutsu. Everybody thought it was a weakness, but he'd turned it into a strength. Much like his sensei, Lee had become so hyper-focused on taijutsu, that there were few in the village that could surpass him. Naturally there were Chunin and Jonin that would be physically more developed, and therefore faster and stronger. Lee's movements were crisp though, as if he'd put thousands upon thousands of reps in. His body almost seemed to move automatically through the movements in a fashion that almost looked surreal. He undoubtedly broke his body down time and time again to get to where he was. Naruto respected him immensely, perhaps more than any other genin. Naruto also knew that Neji was a genius, one of prodigal renown, even amongst the Hyuga. As strong as Hinata had gotten, and as far as she'd come, he still didn't think she'd be a match for him. For all Lee was as a strong-fisted taijutsu specialist, he'd never beaten Neji. Not even once. He heard the comments from Neji when Naruto trained with Hinata. The remarks that he was just like my hopeless teammate when he would go until he dropped. Neji seemed to think that was an insult. Naruto wholeheartedly disagreed. He liked Neji, despite his worldview. Hinata had hinted at what had happened to him. Naruto figured there was just a stick lodged up in him that needed removing. Still, he knew who he was rooting for. Maybe Lee could dislodge that stick if he kicked him hard enough. The contestants squared off to each other. Whether it was the design of the arena, or some sort of seal he'd never heard of, their words traveled extremely well. He couldn't hear them over the roar of the crowd though, until he channeled chakra to focus his hearing. Why don't you just give up, Lee? Neji scoffed at him. You know that you cannot beat me. Why try? Why humiliate yourself? I cannot give up, Neji. Lee shouted. He was a bit easier to hear. For you are my eternal rival. We shall have a hot-blooded battle to show off our youth and see who it is that is more of a splendid shinobi. Time and time again, Neji said, bitterness intoning his voice. I have told you. I have shown you. I have given you scars to prove it. Naruto winced at that. He'd felt the force of the Jukin before. When will you figure it out, Lee? You were fated, from the day you were born, to be inferior to me. Nothing you do will change that. No matter how many push-ups or squats or kicks or punches, you won't be able to beat me. Lee could only smile in the face of his teammate. He knew where the bitterness was coming from. He knew it wasn't directed at him. That deep down, in his own weird way, Neji was trying to help him. Lee's smile turned into a blinding grin. My rival, your youthful passion is misplaced, but it is great to see it no less. Lee said, I cannot wait to trade blows with you and see who is victorious today. Lee gave him a big thumbs up to emphasize his youthfulness. Neji could only grit his teeth. They'd been round and round this loop many a time. He turned to Genma. Proctor, I think it's time you start the match. Nothing I say will get through to him without showing him what I mean first. Genma shrugged noncommittally, but raised his hand nonetheless. Both fighters were ready. Genma's hand dropped. Unsurprisingly, Lee made the first move. He sprinted at Neji blindly quick, and lashed out with a vicious kick aimed at the Hyuga's head. Neji shifted his upper body out of the way, and moved his feet smoothly to keep his balance. He brought his arm up to strike at Lee's chakra point, but Lee was too well practiced at fighting his teammate. He rotated his body to bring his other leg up for a kick, and Neji was forced to retreat 2 steps to avoid the blow. The opening moves happened so fast that the civilians in the audience probably couldn't keep up, but they roared nonetheless. Lee once again charged at Neji, starting with a punch this time. A similar set of moves ensued. Neji moved to counterattack, and Lee countered his counter with another blow, causing Neji to slide out of reach again. This was the ebb and flow of the fight, the same dance that they'd done 100 times now. The moves became more complex, sometimes stretching into combos of 6 or 7 counters before they broke apart. The crowd ate it up. Neji and Sasuke were the 2 big draws to this round of the exams, and never did the crowd think that they would get such a good fight in the first round. Lee, for his part, was holding up extremely well. His lack of chakra use was an advantage here. He would tire slower than Neji would. He just had to wear the Hyuga out. Neji wasn't showing any sign of tiring, but Lee knew he himself could do this all day. And then he slipped up. He attempted a roundhouse, knowing Neji would slip it, and continued his momentum until he'd spun and snapped perfectly into position to throw a huge right hand. He'd pushed his speed, trying to catch his teammate off guard. Neji's eyes widened in surprise minutely, and Lee thought he had him. Then, with the grace of a swan, Neji slid just under the punch, and jabbed him quick as lightning in the forearm. Lee grimaced and jumped away. He'd overextended the tiniest of amounts. Perhaps imperceptibly to the naked eye. Neji had made him pay, as he always did. Lee couldn't help but smirk at his teammate's abilities. Ready to give up yet? Neji asked, and there was a small smirk playing on his lips. One might even think that he enjoyed fighting his teammate. My eternal rival, I am just getting started. Lee shouted, and then he charged. There were 7 more scuffles between the two. They resulted in 5 more closed chakra points. Lee's whole body was stinging at this point. He was used to the pain though, that wasn't the problem. The problem was, despite the fact that he'd limited Neji to no more than 1 strike at a time, he was slowing. At this rate it would be over in another couple of moves. That left him with 3 options. He could forfeit, though he was certain he'd rather die. He could play the moves out, and hope Neji slipped up, though he was certain Neji was more likely to drop dead before that happened. Or, he could unleash his forbidden technique. Risky. Dangerous. He glanced up where he knew Guy-sensei was sitting. He could see the gleam in his teacher's eyes all the way up there. Guy gave him a subtle head nod, a serious look on his face. Lee nodded back, as much to himself as to his sensei. He stepped out of his stance and into a power position. Base wide and strong, fists at his side. He closed his eyes briefly and inhaled fully. He dug deep within himself. He found his core, and with it, his dreams. He wanted to be a splendid shinobi. He wanted to prove all the people who told him he couldn't, wrong. He wanted to prove Guy-sensei right. Most importantly, he wanted to prove himself right. All the hours he bled and sweated couldn't be for nothing. His eyes snapped open, and he let out a scream. The first gate of opening. Open. A pressure released from him, and a heatwave-like appearance came over him. He wasn't done there though, he'd technically opened the first gate to fight Neji before. Primary Lotus required it. It wasn't enough. The second gate of healing. Open. This time a more visible shockwave of chakra came from him. His fatigue faded, and his tenketsu released back open. He felt like a brand new man. He wouldn't stop there though. His sensei had given him a limit, and he wasn't there yet. The third gate of life, open. His roar set the arena on edge. This time there was a palpable change to Lee. His skin faded red, veins bulging everywhere. His hair seemed to float in the air around him. The most concerning part though, as he huffed and heaved, was that his pupils had disappeared. Neji looked on with a growing sense of dread. He'd never seen this technique from his teammate before, but based on what his Byakugan was picking up, it had to be forbidden. Probably the same technique Guy-sensei used. He'd released his chakra gates. That was something that was beyond even the gentle fist. Neji was in shock. He didn't think this was possible, even in the most clinical of settings, and here his dead last teammate had done it in the midst of a fight. He cautiously tightened up his stance. He didn't like the look of things. He was right to be cautious. Lee shot at him like a bullet, and he just barely moved out of the way. Not even his pride could call that a dodge. Luckily, it seemed this technique was costly, and probably not practiced often. In turn, Lee was just slightly off balance, not quite used to his speed. He expected he wouldn't get another freebie. He was right. Lee charged at him again, with the same kick he'd used to open. There was no time to move out of the way. The cross-block he got up was barely in time on its own, and that was despite the fact that Lee had clearly telegraphed it. He slid back a few feet. Neji knew he was in trouble, but Lee was also breathing heavily. Anything with that much of a power boost wouldn't last long. He just had to hold out. Lee was not going to make it easy though. His ever-youthful teammate charged at him again, and this time Neji was more ready. He dodged the first punch, and was barely grazed by the follow-up kick. The second kick caught him though, and despite his textbook block, he found his momentum taking him backwards. His skin was already turning dark where he'd taken Lee's hit. He knew then that he'd have to play one of his trump cards. He'd expected the fight to be fun, but relatively simple for him, as it always was. Now he was going to have to give up one of his most powerful techniques in the first round. Neji skated back, giving himself as much distance as possible. If there was one thing he could count on with Lee, it was that the bowl-cut genin would attack him straight on at all-out speed. He'd just have to time it. Lee stayed true to form, and let out a holler about youth, before charging his teammate. Neji waited, though it wasn't long, and then hespun. As Neji whirled in a circle, expelling chakra from all his tenketsu, several people in the stands were extremely shocked. Naruto Uzumaki was surprised, because it looked an awful lot like the Rasengan. He briefly wondered whether his father had drawn inspiration from the technique. Hinata Hyuga, too, was surprised. She'd known her cousin was working on it, and perhaps had even encouraged him, despite the fact that she knew he was forbidden from learning it. Neji may not believe in her as much as he did Fate, but he was still family in her eyes. Her surprise was rooted more in pride. She was truly proud of him for being such an incredible shinobi. Hiashi Hyuga was shocked. Never had a member of the branch family been able to master a jutsu reserved for the main line. Mastery alone was difficult. Discovering the technique on his own was unheralded. He inwardly lamented over the clan's rules about heirs, and the death of his brother. Perhaps it was time to tell the boy the truth, and give him the scroll. Perhaps it was already too late. The Hyuga clan head shook his head, wishing his wife were there to help advise him. She had always been much better at dealing with the children. Rock Lee, however, didn't share the surprise of the stands. Instead, he smiled. He knew his teammate would not let him down when he unleashed his most powerful technique. Neji never let him down. He could always count on him to step up when it mattered most. An extremely powerful and fast kick met a fast-spinning rotating chakra ball bet in the center, and the whole world exploded. It was more than a minute before the dust settled. When it did, there were two craters revealed, each with a genin dumped into it. Both contestants had been deflected straight backwards forcefully, the power of their techniques too much to be sustained. Neji twitched where he was laying, before crawling his way into a standing position. His headband had fallen off, leaving just the standard shinobi bandages across his forehead. He stumbled once, then twice, before righting himself completely. He began to circulate his chakra and take count of how his body was doing. Rock Lee was slower to get up. His skin had returned to its former color, as had his eyes. His hair, though it was no longer standing on its end, was a mess. His body was shaking as he finally erected himself into a semi-standing position. Neji shook his head. He had almost recovered from their clash, his chakra having shielded him from the worst of it. Lee wouldn't quit though, and he knew it. There was only one way to put him down for sure, and he'd have to be thorough about it if Lee could still open the gates. "I'm sorry, Lee. You are within my field of divination." With that, Neji dropped gracefully into his stance. His mind's eye saw the field and its sectors. Gentle fist art. 8 trigrams 64 palms. And then he moved, and moved did he ever. The technique was one of the Hyuga's most powerful. It was a more targeted version of their typical taijutsu forms, but sped up. Much like a shunshin, the user channeled chakra to their body to speed it up. For this reason it was much more likely to slip through their guard, but also much more difficult for the user to pull off. The fatigue that amounted from it was the main reason it was difficult to use, and the precision required while moving so fast was the reason it was their ultimate attack. Within the Hyuga, there was no greater technique when it came to hand-to-hand combat. It was only limited by the speed and strength of the user, but theoretically it could be used to defeat a cage. It was that technically sound. Within the Hyuga clan, there had never been such a talent as Neji. Therefore, it shouldn't have been a surprise that he pulled it off flawlessly, perfectly striking all 64 targets, effectively rendering Lee useless and unconscious. Still, Hiashi Hyuga was shocked yet again. It just shouldn't be possible. That was a Jonin-level technique reserved for the best of the best, and taught personally by the clan head. It was borderline insubordination just from the audacity Neji had to learn it, let alone perform it so well. Hiashi couldn't help but feel a swell of pride though. He just wished his brother were here to share the joy. He made up his mind then, and he removed himself from his seat. He would go see Neji now. It could wait no longer. Neji's normally stoic, though sometimes harsh, facade had cracked. Gone was the stoicism, the calm, the placid face. He was bent over, leaning on both knees. His body rose and fell as he gulped breath after breath trying to recover. It was a heavy technique for him to be using so young, and he knew that. It had been necessary though. Not just to win the fight, but to show the clan that the main branch wasn't the only one capable of such techniques. More so than that though, it was to give Lee a small bit of validation and respect. He knew how hard his teammate worked, and though he was a dimwit who was fated to be the weaker of the two, he had surprised Neji. He wanted to speak to his teammate and tell him how foolish that had been. But he would be lying. It hadn't been foolish, because Lee had almost beaten him. Neji had never let up on his training, and though he saw most opponents as inferior, he'd never taken it easy on them. Lee was not an exception. If anything, Lee's relentless insistence that they were rivals had pushed him to work even harder to prove him wrong. And still he'd been caught off guard, and almost lucky? Neji was confused as he helped the med nin escort his teammate. So much so that he walked with them straight into the medical suites, instead of back into the competitor's balcony. The crowd had been roaring for him, and later he realized that it was probably for Lee too. He hadn't even noticed. In the stands, Team 9's sensei was leaking tears in a way that was wholly unfit for an elite jonin. Somehow though, it seemed appropriate, and nobody, not even Kakashi, would tease him about it. Not until the next day at least. After things settled down, Hinata and Temari were called to the arena and the crowd cheered again. Back-to-back Hyuga fights would be a treat for them. Ever since the Uchiha had been all but wiped out, the Hyuga had become the crowd favorites in both events and mission requests. Their productivity and gracefulness went a long way with civilians, both royal and otherwise. Hinata, despite being relatively cut from a different cloth, was ever graceful in her movement to the arena center. Not a hair out of place despite her high-speed body flickered to get there, and it earned her a few extra whistles and cheers. The Casecage's daughter got equal excitement when she rode her oversized fan down into the arena. The blood of the crowd was roaring hot, and they wanted to see some action. Hinata smiled as her opponent landed with an extra flourish of wind. She'd worked with Naruto enough before to understand the challenges of facing a futon user. In the shinobi world, knowing was half the battle. Unfortunately, the gentle fist-fighting style was perhaps the most well-known style left in the shinobi world. Given the fact that one of the largest clans in the largest village relied on it almost exclusively, she wouldn't be surprised if Temari knew what was coming. Nonetheless, she was confident. The proctor smirked at the fact that both Kunoichi seemed ready to fight without a single word exchange. He raised his hand, and Hinata heard the crowd go silent. The Hyuga heiress versus the Casecage's daughter probably made the betting choice difficult for them, she supposed. They were probably too intrigued by what would happen to make much noise. There was a palpable tension in the air as Genma's hand cut through it. It was Temari who made the first move, unsurprisingly. She was clearly a very tenacious ninja, and seemed eager to prove her worth. That was fine by Hinata, she would bide her time and strike when she could. That was her role after all, and she certainly knew how to play it. She sidestepped the first big swipe of wind easily enough. She didn't need her famed dojutsu to analyze the attack. Straightforward and big, with blunt force and cutting action. Best to avoid if at all possible. The second gust of wind, and it was only a gust, was also easily sidestepped. Hinata almost scoffed at Temari. She knew what she was capable of, and this was not it. Clearly she was just testing her out. Fine, two could play at that game. As she sidestepped the second jutsu, she removed a few kunai from her pouch. Once she was clear of the wind, she smoothly flicked the kunai at the sand ninja, timing it well enough that she wouldn't be able to use a jutsu. Temari closed her fan, and blocked both kunai with the metal base of it. She smirked at Hinata as if that had been easy. Truth be told, it was. She'd barely thrown them, and certainly hadn't expected them to get through. With Temari's fan closed, she decided it was time to try and close the gap. She sprinted forward, activating her Byakugan as she ran. Changing angles and feinting a few times to try and throw off Temari, she slowly closed the gap. It wasn't until she was about 10 meters away, when Temari got a lock on her. The sand genin whipped her fan as if it was made from something much lighter than metal. From this close, dodging was difficult. The wind would get to her fast, and with more force than the first two. She had factored this into her strategy though. Moving to her right, she spun to add momentum and distance. She made it just outside of the Justu's reach. The wind flaring her hair, and even the headband around her neck, wildly. There was a problem though. Temari was spinning full circle, fan still splayed widely. This had not been a part of her strategy. Her intention was to avoid the wind altogether. It was a nasty style of jutsu, and while it was chakra intensive, there was a reason. The Casecage's daughter could cover a wide section of both ground and air, both cutting and delivering blunt force. As Temari completed her spin, she knew there would be no dodging. The amount of chakra she was charging into the jutsu was much greater than the previous three. This was an all-out attack, meant to end the match right then and there. Hinata's face tightened minutely as her body tensed. She had one true counter to this, and she would have to time it perfectly. She wasn't Neji after all. As Temari's fan let the wind rip, she flexed her chakra. The wind slammed into her, and she let it. Flying back, she flipped back and let her momentum give her distance. She landed on both feet and one hand. She slid 10, 20, almost 30 meters before coming to a surprisingly graceful stop. She stood calmly, revealing herself to be slightly dustier, hair a little unkempt, but with no injuries. Not a single scratch. Temari tilted her head in confusion, clearly not understanding how she hadn't been cut. Though she might not be as skilled as Neji, as she herself would readily admit, Hinata worked hard. While she hadn't mastered the main family's rotation jutsu, she had a few of the steps down. Namely the forceful expulsion of chakra from all tenketsu. As the wind had nearly hit her, she forced her chakra out, effectively shielding her from the cutting power of the wind when it struck. She couldn't maintain it the way the proper jutsu required, nor could she stop the attack from moving her altogether. She could, however, direct the cutting power of the jutsu to either side of her. Truth be told, it didn't even waste all that much chakra for her to do. It was more taxing than the typical Juken strikes, sure, but it was nothing compared to the actual rotation. Temari may not have known the explanation, but she grunted angrily, and whipped her fan around again, this time sending out an even larger gust of wind. Hinata was able to dodge this one at a full sprint, though the trees behind her didn't fare as well. After 3 or 4 more jutsu, Temari's breathing difficulty had increased noticeably, however much she tried to hide it. There were branches and logs and rocks beginning to litter the battlefield as she cut up the arena floor. The Byakugan drained chakra at a high rate, but Hinata had trained with it relentlessly to keep it active for her team. She judged that at this rate she could outlast Temari several-fold, as the kunoichi was clearly burning through chakra with her large-scale attacks. It didn't take long for Temari's plan to be revealed though. She shifted her chakra in a way that gathered rather than cut, and swept the arena floor with her wind. A vortex picked up everything on the arena floor. The dust, rocks, wood shrapnel, ninja tools, everything that had accumulated on the ground from this exam and all the previous events in the arena, was brought into the air. Temari was already in the air as Hinata watched the debris rise, and soon she realized the plan. The sand ninja's fan splayed wide, and Hinata readied herself. She'd have to use her new jutsu. She had no idea if it would work, but the angle Temari was at provided her with no other options. Temari's fan flashed through the air, sending hundreds of debris-turned weapon flying down at her. Hinata stuck her feet to the ground with chakra, as she had learned what felt like a lifetime ago, but had been less than a year. She'd grown so much since then, and now it was time to prove it. Gentle fist. Protection of the 8 trigrams 64 palms. She whispered to herself with a calm force she didn't know she possessed. As the projectiles rained down on her, she began swiping her arms through the air above and around her quickly. She sharpened her chakra to the maximum degree, thinning it out until it was barely visible even to her own eyes. She gained speed, swaying gracefully as she created a lattice of fine, sharp chakra around her. The first of the projectiles rained down on her. The lighter debris, that was more easily flung due to its weight. Bark and dust and leaves. Nothing survived as it came into contact with her chakra, it was all shredded and obliterated. Not even the dust made it past. Then came the heavier items, rocks and kunai and the like. Each one was caught in her net of chakra and forcefully deflected away. It was as if a steel net had been laid over her. 5, then 10 seconds passed, and the chakra from the attack died down. Temari tried to use the opportunity to attack, and rode gravity and her fan down at Hinata. The Hyuga leapt well clear of the way, and they both squared off once more. Hinata was sweating, entirely unfit for a Hyuga heiress, and yet she felt so alive she couldn't be bothered to care. She took deep breaths, trying to calm her breathing and heart. Unlike the first shield she had made, that technique used up quite a bit of chakra. The coverage wasn't as extensive as the rotation, but the chakra output was constant and fast. Temari was much the same, breathing heavy from using so much chakra. Her gamble hadn't paid off in the way that she had hoped, but at least the Hyuga looked almost as tired as her now. In typical form, Hinata stood in a ready stance and waited. As strong as she'd become, she was still never the aggressor. She would defend with all she had until there was an opening or slip up. That was the way she was. On the other hand, Temari was more than happy to attack first, and had an idea. She couldn't afford another attack like her last one, but then, Hinata couldn't afford another defense. She reached back with her fan, getting ready to launch another strong gust, and slipped a hand into her pouch discreetly. The Byakugan would be able to see, but it was still good to practice deception as a ninja. As she swung around, she flicked an entire brace of kunai up in front of her. Her fan swept across, the wind sending the kuani speeding at her opponent, and she smirked. Not enough chakra for her 8 trigrams defense, and not enough power in her small chakra shield to stop kunai. Hinata knew she was in trouble the moment she saw Temari grab the kunai. There was nowhere for her to go though. She'd spent most of her life hiding, whether it be behind actual objects or her own shyness. Now, before almost the entire village, she wasn't able to do that. She would have to stand there and be Hinata Hyuga, the failure of Konoha's greatest clan. She couldn't use her protection of the 8 trigrams again. She couldn't use the first step of heavenly rotation, it wasn't strong enough to stop kunai. She wouldn't be able to block that many with her strikes. None of her Hyuga techniques would work, and yet, she smirked ever so slightly. It would be fitting if the failure of the Hyuga would win using a non-clan technique. Even before she thought it, her hands were racing through signs at a speed born from hours of training and instinct. As her chakra finished molding, she knelt and slammed her hands into the ground. She pushed her chakra out, concentrating it into a precise area, and willed it to move and strengthen. A wall of earth shot up. It wasn't massive or even all that impressive. About 6 or 7 feet wide, and only about a head taller than her. The kunai struck and dug into the wall, but it was thick enough to withstand them easily enough. As the wind from the just use smashed into the wall, the edges crumbled, but she was okay with that. She'd concentrated most of the chakra into the part that would actually protect her. The rest was pointless, as far as she was concerned. The wind died down. The wall held. The crowd was absolutely silent. Nobody had ever seen a Hyuga use a technique that wasn't developed by the clan. Certainly nobody had ever considered that the daughter of the clan head would do it in the Chunin exams of all places. There was a heartbeat of silence, then too. Hell yeah, Hinata. A voice shouted with pride, cutting through the silence. I told you she was badass, Granny. Hinata didn't have time to bask in her teammates' pride though, she had more work to do. More hand signs were used, and then she rushed out from behind the wall. Temari, for her part, wasn't too caught off guard by the wall. Surprised, sure, but she'd fought Earth users before. When Hinata rushed out, she had enough time to use another jutsu. She whipped her fan viciously, having grown tired of the fight. The concentrated burst of wind was, once again, sidestepped graciously. Temari wasn't done though, and channeled chakra into her shoulder and arm, and whipped the fan back once more. There wouldn't be time to dodge this one though. She was right. The wind collided with Hinata, and ripped her apart into nothing. She just disappeared, almost like an illusion. Temari's eyes widened, but she was out of time. The blunt end of a kunai slammed into her temple in a way that could only be described as gentle, but precise, and she was unconscious. She'd fallen for a simple academy-level clone. Hinata stood there, over Temari's unconscious body. She didn't gloat or celebrate, she just looked at the proctor, though her timidness was gone. She was calm, sure. Quiet even. It was because she was confident though, not because she wasn't. When she'd used the mud wall, something inside of her had changed. There was no going back now. Her family would probably disown her, and she'd known that. She didn't care. The proctor stared at her silently, until she coughed politely in her hand. That seemed to startle Genma out of his slight daze, and he declared her the winner. She immediately bent down with a glowing green hand, and checked over Temari. What an odd Hyuga, Genma thought. Then again, she was teammates with Naruto, and that set of hand seals for the mud wall had Kakashi written all over it. Weird was to be expected in that case. Hinata abandoned the pretense that she was unnaturally graceful, and ran and leapt onto the wall. She stumbled ever so slightly as she ran up it until she made it to the competitor's balcony. Sasuke rested a hand on her shoulder with a grin, and slowly, the sounds of the arena stands began to filter their way to her ears. It was loud, very loud. Amongst all the cheering though, somehow, she could hear a certain blonde knucklehead shouting his voice away. She smiled and blushed. Chapter 23. The Finals. Naruto was having a hard time calming down after Hinata's fight. He was by far the loudest of everybody in the stadium cheering. Normally that was something that Tsunade would beat out of him. Except she'd taken his advice, and actually won a bet for once. She too, was standing up roaring, only being outmatched by Naruto's shouts. The only two people in the crowd not cheering were Shizune and Jiraiya, though the latter had a big smile on his face. They both knew that Tsunade winning a bet was generally a bad omen. As happy as they were for Naruto and his teammate, they couldn't shake the bad feeling that they had in their mind. Naruto was completely oblivious to them though, and kept up his loud shouting and clapping to the point where they nearly had to delay the next match because of him. Only the fact that Shino had his own opportunity made him settle down. Shino's match was a masterclass in what being shinobi was truly about. The boy was not traditionally powerful, and anyone who didn't know of the Aburame would surely count him out compared to the others around him. He was quiet, to the point of almost being non-existent in larger groups. In Naruto's eyes though, he was something else. Loyal, observant, clever, and above all, deceptive. Fighting Shino was like trying to fight your own shadow. Just when you thought you had it, he slipped through your grasp. His movements were precise and his strategy was always sound. He knew what he was capable of and wouldn't overextend himself in an effort to be flashy or make something impossible happen. He just wore you down. That's exactly what he did to Kankuro. The puppet user must have thought he'd taken Shino down at least 3 times, only to find that it was an insect clone. They both had elected to fight in the more forested area of the arena, knowing that hiding their presence was a big part of their styles. Shino was just a little better at it. He used the trees and his bugs to the maximum of their potential, and eventually he exhausted Kankuro's chakra supply with his insects. He'd even survived a poison bomb and kept going, though he needed a medic after he was declared the winner. He probably had at least some immunity to the poison. The Aburame knew their stuff when it came to deceitful fighting. Naruto once again cheered, albeit from his seat this time, as standing with a cast and a crutch was difficult. He beamed with pride. Technically Shino was on Team 8, but Naruto considered his whole graduating class to be his teammates if he was being honest. Kiba's fight was next, with Kintsuchi. He and Akamaru made their way to the arena floor with big smiles on their faces, but weren't greeted by Genjutsu user from Sound. After 10 minutes he was declared the winner, much to his dismay. He'd been itching to fight her. More than likely just for a fight in general, but at least he'd moved on to the next round. That meant it was Sasuke's turn, and Naruto grew quiet in a sea of chaos as the crowd erupted. It was clear that the Uchiha was the main event for them, and even better that he was fighting the Casecage's son. It had within it the potential to be one of the greatest Chunin exam fights they'd ever seen. That didn't ease Naruto's worry though. He had plenty of faith in Sasuke, but it only took one slip-up to be grabbed by that sand. He'd been there. He'd experienced it. He'd feel better if Sasuke didn't have to go through it. Hopefully he wouldn't mess around and go right for his trump card. He obviously wouldn't be able to outlast Gaara in a battle of stamina, not without the amount of chakra he had. Naruto rolled his eyes as Sasuke landed next to Genma, hands in his pockets, as if he was in line for ramen instead of about to fight an unstable Jinchuuriki. His opponent appeared in a whisper of sand. Ice cold, chakra boiling just beneath the surface. "Will you be the one," Gaara said, "to prove my existence?" Sasuke narrowed his dark eyes. "The only existence I care about, Ishii's. You're just a stepping stone for me. A pebble on my path to the mountain. You're just like the others. You will prove my existence. Mother will have your blood." Sasuke's eyes swirled red. "Proctor, start the fight." Genma nodded and looked at Gaara. He received no response, as the redhead was staring down Sasuke. That was enough for him. His hand cut through the air, and he leapt back. Immediately Sasuke snared Gaara in a genjutsu with his eyes. It was foolish of him to look into them in the first place. He flashed to the right, but the boy's head turned to follow him. His connection to the genjutsu was simply gone. He tried again, as Gaara was still staring at him. He paid closer attention this time, and felt it take hold, but as soon as it clicked into place it was just gone. That was odd. He didn't see him cause any physical pain, and didn't feel him flare his chakra either. It was like he was constantly defending against genjutsu without much effort. Annoying, but it explained why he was so willing to look into the Sharingan. Fine by him, Genjutsu was never really his style anyway. He paused his sprint and flicked through hand signs, ending in the tiger. A grand fireball erupted from his mouth, nearly white-hot, and large enough to swallow the boy whole. He was an Uchiha, and this is what they wanted. He'd give them a show before he ended the fight. The sand rose as expected, and defended against the fire. The force of the techniques meeting made the ground rumble. The fire died, and the sand glowed red, but held easily. Sasuke shrugged internally, well aware that would be the result. The crowd roared, their Uchiha showing off the signature fire. He whipped out 2 kunai, throwing one with each hand straight for Gaara. Immediately, he grabbed and threw 2 shuriken out wide to wrap around the wall that would inevitably rise. The shuriken whistled through the air, curving around the building wall of sand. The kunai struck it and fell. The shuriken suffered the same fate, as 2 more walls rose, one on each side of Gaara. This was nothing Sasuke hadn't expected or prepared for. Just because you knew something was going to happen though didn't mean you shouldn't test it for yourself. Gaara could have gotten faster in the previous month, just as he had. It seemed that was the case, however minor the change was. That also fell within his plans. Gaara hadn't attacked yet, only defended, but Sasuke could tell that he was getting restless. It wouldn't be long before he went on the offense. Then the real fun would begin, and he would have a chance to taste revenge. It wasn't more than a moment or two before Gaara began to send out his sand. Sasuke in his previous attacks, and maneuvered just close enough that it would entice Gaara. Now, as large tendrils of it came racing after him, he did what his pride had long since decided wasn't worth his time. He retreated. His training for the last month certainly hadn't gone to waste. His speed was vicious with his elevated chakra control, paired with his fully matured base Sharingan. Dodging the sand as he moved further and further away was little more than child's play. He finished his barrage of dodges by backhand sprinting up onto the wall of the arena. He stuck there on the side, crouched down, and took in the arena with his famed dojutsu. Gaara's sand didn't follow him, but it hovered near the base where he'd leapt from. The rocks and ninja tools from Hinata's fight all registered all at once to him. He saw Naruto sitting front row with the rest of their class that hadn't passed. Hinata in the competitors' booth with those that did. Neji had returned at some point. All of it flashed into his brain in a split second. Gaara moved for the first time, and his Sharingan filled him with the new information it collected. The red-headed boy in the middle of the arena uncrossed his arms. He seemed to be interrupted by a flash of pain, his hand coming up to press against his eye, and Sasuke's eyes picked up the surge of chakra within him. Gaara soon recovered, and his hands came together in a single seal, and the sand retracted itself as if called by him. This was a surprise to Sasuke, and hurt the chances of his strategy working. Or so he thought, until he saw the sand rise into a sphere surrounding the boy. It was a few inches thick, and laden with dense chakra. An ultimate defense. Good thing he had a jutsu that could cut through anything. As he smiled to himself, he saw a small portion of sand coalesce into an eye, hovering far above the dome. The chakra it linked to told him that it would be Gaara's only way to determine what was going on outside his shield. He'd have to take a page out of Naruto's book to take care of that. Sasuke laxed his chakra and slid smoothly down the wall. Slowly walking towards Gaara, he circulated his chakra, warming up his system. He paused and put his hands into a plus sign. He'd seen Naruto do it 1,000 times, and his eyes had long since snagged the jutsu from him. This was the first time since his chakra had developed enough that he'd felt like he truly needed it though. His clone took off to the side, out of sight, out of mind. He knew he could trust it to do its job though. It was time for all his hard work to pay off. He thought about the time that a thunderstorm had overtaken the village. He'd been 7 at the time. The thunder scared him. He'd run to his brother, knowing his father wouldn't tolerate the weakness. Itachi said it was okay, that everything would be alright. He poked him in the forehead, the way Sasuke had always hated. Before he could complain to his big brother, a massive bolt of lightning struck the top of the gate to the compound. Perhaps it had been an omen. He channeled the rage the memory brought up, compressed it down in his core with his chakra. He combined it with the feeling of that hugely powerful force of nature striking down. He precisely flowed through hand signs. There were only 3 seals, but his chakra became dangerously active. He grabbed onto his left wrist to stabilize it, and poured chakra into his palm. The air smelled of ozone, and the hair all over his body stood on end. Lightning chakra began to crackle and gather in his hand, until it sounded like the birds the jutsu was named after. He spoke only one word, but he spoke it with conviction. Chidori. And then he rushed the Jinchuuriki of the one-tailed beast. Naruto watched as his best friend used first his own signature jutsu, and then Kakashi-sensei's original jutsu. The power was palpable from where he was sitting, even with his sensory ability dulled. He was too nervous to be outwardly proud though. He knew that this was the moment that would decide the fight. He was sitting forward on the edge of his seat, his hand gripping his crutch tightly. He briefly heard Guy-sensei and Kakashi-sensei discussing the technique, perhaps explaining it to the others, but he paid it no mind. Time seemed to slow down as Sasuke took off sprinting. He was noticeably faster than his already improved speed. As he streaked across the ground, the lightning built up in his hand tore a trench through it. It destroyed dirt, rocks, sand, everything in its path. Sand began jutting out from him in lances from Gaara's sphere. That was when Sasuke's shadow clone revealed its reason for existence. High up in the air, streaking through it was the second Sasuke. Was that lightning crackling around him? It was hard to tell, but he was moving fast. Really fast. He was headed straight for the eye of sand that Gaara had created. He didn't necessarily have to destroy it, only block its view. The eye bobbed and weaved as the clone came for it. A burst of fire left its mouth, wide-angled and slow. Just before the clone entered its own flames, something slipped out of its hand. As the real Sasuke began strafing through the sand attacks, the clone's fire enveloped the eye. It wouldn't destroy it, it wasn't even a strong attack compared to the first one he'd used. It would block its line of sight though. The flames dissipated quickly, but the object was soon revealed to be a smoke bomb. It burst in mid-air and hovered. The plan was definitely working. As the eye's sight was blocked, the sand around became less of a threat. Every footstep that made contact, the sand would rush at that spot. By the time it got there, it was only spearing empty air, rather than the speeding Uchiha. It was now entirely reactive to his touch. He was only 3 steps away now, a distance he could cover in a near instant. As his foot touched the ground, and his chakra blasted through it, his Sharingan showed him what would happen. The precognition of the dojutsu was perhaps its most valuable asset, even more so than the ability to copy jutsu. He was the chakra shift in the sand, saw the way it would spear out in hundreds of spikes right at him to try and counter his rush. Yet another smirk appeared on his face. His next move was more of a lunge than a step or a sprint. His right foot came into contact with the ground, chakra rushing through it just like all the previous steps. This time though, he used it to launch himself at a near 45-degree angle to the left. He'd made it all the way to the side of the sphere. Out of the danger of the sand spikes. His left foot planted hard, and his whole body rotated. Like throwing his most powerful punch, but with his hand as a blade. The lightning crackled as it crossed into his field of vision, nearly cutting off his eyesight. The sand was now rushing towards him. It wouldn't make it in time to stop him. He was too fast while wielding the Chidori. His hand met the sand, and the lack of resistance was nearly a shock to him. Even when he'd been training for the technique, the rocks he'd been using it on had felt tougher than this. The lightning-sheathed hand slipped through unimpeded. This was it. He'd put the jutsu right through Gaara, and make him pay. He would give the sand genin what he deserved, for hurting his friend. For crippling his brother. The lightning parted the sand as if it was in control of it, but when the part of his hand covered in chakra slipped all the way through, he slowed abruptly. Now that there was no chakra to dissuade the sand, it clamped onto his arm tight, jarring his shoulder. His momentum carried him though, and he gritted his teeth to keep it going. His hand struck something and buried itself a few inches deep before he was brought to a halt. He let the lightning chakra rip its way back up his arm to his shoulder, breaking him free from the sand. The sand spears were on him now, and one clipped his thigh before he leapt back quickly, once again out of the reach of the sand. All of it happened in an instant, and Naruto watched with a horror and fascination growing in his eyes. The moment Sasuke landed from his retreat, a brutal, blood-curdling scream cut through the air. It was coming from Gaara's sand sphere. "What is this?" Naruto's chakra-enhanced hearing heard. "Blood? It's my blood." His voice was different now. crazed, like he barely had control over it. You will not erase my existence. I won't allow it. Mother will have your blood. That didn't sound good. The sand receded from its sphere around Gaara and began swirling around him. His right shoulder had a chunk of sand over it, almost like a bandage. As he watched, Naruto saw it grow steadily, covering his entire arm. It continued to grow in volume, turning into a massive clawed arm of sand, with dark blue marks swirling across it. Naruto tried to focus on what was happening, but feathers began to dance across his vision, and he grew unusually tired. Then all hell broke loose. Then Genjutsu flooding Naruto's system was a powerful one. A rank without a doubt. Spreading it over the crowd made it easier to break though, the user's hold wouldn't be that as secure as normal. It took Naruto a considerable effort to summon the chakra and control to break it. Under normal circumstances what he was able to use wouldn't be enough, but his chakra had a potency rarely seen in the shinobi world. His chakra expelled the foreign breach in his system, and the world sharpened into a horrifying clarity. Fights were beginning to break out across the arena. The Leaf's Anbu and higher-level shinobi were trying to protect the unconscious civilians and lower-level shinobi. He turned to Jiraiya and Tsunade. Shizune was already up and gone. The Sannin were discussing the plan. As they talked, a purple barrier went up on the roof of a building, one very near to the Hokage Tower. In the center of the arena, Sasuke was circling Gaara slowly, trying to find an opening. The redhead was holding his head with his hand, clearly suffering from a massive headache. As he watched, Hinata joined Sasuke in the arena. His team. They needed him. Pervy Sage. Remove the seal, Naruto said, holding up his blue shirt. He was trying his best to sound authoritative and certain. What? Jiraiya said. Absolutely not, Naruto. Tsunade said. We don't know what the consequences of the chakra will be. Naruto shook his head and flexed his fist. It doesn't matter, he said. My team is down there fighting a Jinchuuriki, and what good am I as the Leafs if I can't help them? How can I be the Hokage and protect the village if I can't even protect my friends? His anger was burning dangerously hot. You have to listen to her, Naruto. It could ruin your limbs permanently. Naruto growled at him. Actually growled. The Hokage, your sensei, is under attack. The village is under attack. There's a Jinchuuriki running loose. A giant crash interrupted him, and a massive three-headed snake could be seen breaking down one of the walls. And there's a fucking snake destroying our walls. The village needs me. Remove the seal or I'll go down there with it on, and probably die. The last words barely escaped his mouth as he yelled, his voice hoarse, and ran out of breath. He heaved to try and catch, staring at Jiraiya in both anger and desperation. Jiraiya took a moment to consider it, but a moment was all he had. He held up his hand. Five-pronged seal. Jiraiya, no. Tsunade argued. It's his decision, Tsunade, and he's my charge. He sounded sorrowful. Besides, he's right. He'll just go get himself killed if I don't. He's beaten worse odds before. Jiraiya said. He looked Naruto in his eyes, spending one last precious moment to communicate years of their bond. And then he struck Naruto with his jutsu. The pain wasn't quite blinding, but it was a shock to his system nonetheless. The force of Jiraiya striking him lifted him off the ground, and his body folded slightly around his stomach. He began to fall backwards, and as he did he felt it. The rush of chakra. His chakra. The Nine Tails chakra. Then the signatures of everybody around him. The sheer amount of information flowing into him overloaded his senses, and he lost consciousness before he hit the ground. Drip, drip, drip. Naruto woke up on his back. But he wasn't in the arena anymore. He was in a foot of water. He was within his seal. A growl came from behind the bars. Chapter 24. Konoha Crush Point. I drip. Drip, drip. The Kyuubi growled behind the bars. Naruto sat up and looked at the massive chakra beast. Naruto had steadily earned the title of Konoha's most unpredictable ninja. In 6 months, there was little doubt that anyone else in the village could compete with him for it. Still, what he did next came as a shock, even to himself. He laughed. The village was on fire, his arm and leg were broken, his best friends were about to fight an unstable Jinchuuriki. He was facing down the nine-tailed fox, who was clearly grumpy, and he was laughing. Hysterical laughter that started in his throat and was nearly splitting open his side after a few moments. Bent over in pain, holding his stomach, he laughed until he was out of breath. He plopped over on his side, splashing in the water of his mindscape. The nine-tailed fox had been breathing heavier and heavier. His anger was becoming so palpable it began to weigh down even on Naruto, despite the boy's familiarity with his presence. The blonde pushed himself to his feet and dusted himself off exaggeratedly. "What are you so upset about, furball?" he asked with a huge grin. "You came into my seal with that annoying laugh. You woke me up from the most peaceful sleep I've had since we met," the fox huffed. Naruto laughed again, this one much more under control. "Yeah, I guess that makes sense, I'd be pissed too," he admitted, chuckling. He felt lighter than he had in a long while. "I've just been a little down the last month. I forgot how good it felt to have our chakra flowing so smoothly." "Our chakra? You dare compare that light breeze you called chakra to mine? Oh come on fox, I'm not that far behind you," Naruto said. The Kyuubi's eyes burned through him. "Okay fine, maybe I have a little ways to go," Naruto admitted, "but I'm catching up fast." The fox only continued to stare at Naruto, and the genin began laughing again. Yeah, Naruto said. "I know, I'm actually here to ask for your help." Naruto's voice turned serious. Konoha is under attack by the Sand Village and Orochimaru. He'd felt a glimpse of the snake's chakra before he passed out. That was a signature that would be hard to forget. "My best friends are fighting the container of the One Tail. The same one who broke my arm and destroyed my leg." Naruto's eyes were focused intently on the bottom of the cage. "I need to be strong enough to protect them. I need to be strong enough to protect the village and everybody in it." He looked up at the nine tails, and there was a fire burning in his eyes that brought a wave of nostalgia to the beast. The fox pondered the boy and his words for several moments before speaking. "If it is as grave as you say, then why do you waste time here, when all your problems are out there?" Naruto clenched his fists. "Because I'm not strong enough, not yet. I need your help," he admitted. "Yet you don't just take my chakra by force like normal. I need more. If Orochimaru really is out there, One Tail won't be enough. You know I can't control more than that though." His voice got quiet. "I need your help." The Kyuubi laughed a deep, hearty chuckle. "My puny jailer, the one who's going to be the Hokage someday, needs my help," the fox laughed again. "Why should I help you?" "Because I need it," Naruto said. The fox huffed. "And like it or not we're in this together. That makes us partners doesn't it?" he asked. The fox was reminded of that day 6 years ago, when Naruto had first entered the seal. "We are not. I did not choose to be sealed inside of you. And I didn't choose to be stuck with you either, you stupid fox." Naruto yelled, exasperated. "I didn't choose to be treated so badly, or to be forced to leave the village just so that I could grow up and survive." There was pain in his voice. Chakra began to leak unconsciously from his system, responding to his emotions. "I didn't choose to be selected as the village's weapon. To be looked at and only see the beast sealed within me." His voice was becoming hoarse from emotion. He grabbed his chest, balling his black shirt into his fist. "And you didn't choose to have your freedom stolen. We both got dealt shitty hands." Naruto breathed heavily, calming enough to speak rather than yell. His eyes glistened with tears. "So why are we on opposing sides? I thought we had a connection. One nobody else could understand." His chakra was flowing freely now. It was warmth, and it was brightness. As he spoke, the dark room of the sewer that was his mental landscape began to lighten up, ever so slightly. "We are the only two who truly understand what the other is going through. Not even the other Jinchuuriki can understand me the way you can. From the moment you were sealed inside of me, we both lost our freedom, and we both were condemned to a life of solitude." Naruto ground out, and the lighting flickered minutely. "But there's one thing, above all else, that I've learned." His chakra flowed into the water below him, and it rose the level of it outside the cage, bringing him closer to the fox's eye level. "Just because life dealt you a shitty hand, doesn't mean you have to accept it. Just because we are stuck in this situation, doesn't mean we have to be miserable. You can always make things better. Always." He was staring the fox in the eyes now. The determination was one often seen in Naruto. Perhaps it was a defining feature of his. Still, the fox was surprised by the tenacity of the look. The light within the mindscape was bright now, lit up like the Hokage's office on a sunny day. All we have to do is decide. Decide if we're going to let the seal that ties us together ruin us. Divide us. Cause us to fight until one of us dies." He pointed at the Kyuubi, and his chakra welled forward, surrounding the fox in an invisible blanket. There wasn't any intent to harm in it though, the fox noticed. It was almost comforting. Trying to protect him? What a foolish notion. I already made my decision, Naruto said, and the light in the seal reached its peak, lit up like the fire country sun at noon on a summer day, when it was so hot that you had to be inside to be comfortable. What's yours gonna be? The nine-tailed fox, most powerful of all the Biju, looked down at the preteen who not only stood bravely before him, but dared raise himself up to his height. The little brat was doing it again without even knowing it. How was he able to wield ninchu without being taught? This time though it was more than just a faint feeling. He could see the kid's memories. Like a fuzzy video, where the sound was distorted. That was how he knew he wasn't lying when he otherwise would accuse him. Before I answer your question, brat, answer one for me first. Naruto nodded, though the fox intended to ask regardless of permission. By your own words, the village shunned you, cast you out, condemned you, all because of me. And not only do you wish to protect and save them all, but you wish to do it with my help? Why? Naruto chuckled, though it was drier and had a sharper edge this time. The lights in the seal dimmed, but his chakra continued to wash over the space. Because I was given a chance. By Jiji and Tuchi and Iruka-sensei. Then Jiraiya. A tear fell down Naruto's cheek. He showed me what it was like to live. What happened when there was no hate to receive. To have a family. He sniffled. It changed me. I went from having to act happy to actually feeling happy. The hate I didn't even know I had started to go away. Naruto smiled. I was given a chance, one I never thought I'd have, because people started believing in me. He reached out a hand, palm up in offering, a huge grin on his face and tears still in his eyes. Let me be the first to believe in you. The fox's giant eyes widened in surprise. He hadn't been expecting that. Not just in this moment, or from Naruto, but ever. He was being recognized by the very person who jailed him, as more than just a beast. It was almost as if Naruto was recognizing him as an equal. The thought nearly made him scoff. The words the boy had spoken though, weren't far off the mark. The chakra he was feeling, the memories he was seeing. It was all very similar. They'd both gone down the same road, but his feelings had turned to hate after hundreds of years, where Naruto's had turned into determination. Even if I wanted to, Naruto, the boy's eyes widened minutely. The fox never called him by his name. And I'd love to put that damned tanuki in his place, I cannot help. The seal the Hokage put on me is a filter, but it uses your will as the catalyst. It is not me that corrupts, besides the words I whisper in your ear. The fox lifted its head up for the first time. Power itself corrupts. It corrodes the mind and the will. That is why humans have been corrupted. My chakra is the most powerful on this earth. Wielding it is no small feat. If you want the power, you will have to be strong enough, both physically and spiritually, to wield it yourself. The Kyuubi explained. I cannot help you, but I will not fight you either. Not this time at least. My will, huh? You might have the strongest chakra in the world, Fox. But nobody has a stronger and more stubborn will than me, or my name isn't Naruto Uzumaki. He gave the Kyuubi a smile so big his eyes squeezed shut, and an exaggerated thumbs up. Very well then, Naruto Uzumaki. Do not embarrass me, or I will eat you. Then the fox pushed chakra through the seal, sending Naruto back to consciousness. Before Naruto was gone though, their chakra connected. The link that Naruto had been unknowingly telegraphing to the fox became a two-way tunnel. In that single moment, Naruto saw into the heart of the nine-tailed demon fox. He saw the old wrinkly man with purple ringed eyes, smiling down on him. He felt the love the Kyuubi had for the man. Then the feelings turned dark. He felt all the hatred the fox had built over the years. Unbearable hatred that nearly drove him mad. So much hatred, so much loneliness. And suddenly, he was looking down at himself from the Kyuubi's eyes. He felt a strange sense of nostalgia, and possibly the slightest glimmer of hope, buried beneath all the hate and rage, and even indifference. He felt it all in an instant, and he couldn't help but let his jaw drop open. Internally though, he smiled. There was hope for the fox yet. He was sure of it, and he wouldn't give up on him. Naruto awoke on the cool concrete ground of the arena. He felt so alive. He was lovingly reminded by his arm and leg that living people felt pain. The nerves sent their signals to his brain, and he flinched. His sensory abilities flooded his senses again. He was getting overwhelmed by it all. He took a deep breath, and pushed all of it to the side as best as he could. This was the moment of truth. He drew on the near-infinite well sitting just underneath the surface inside of him. The fox's chakra was eager as always to filter through the seal, to corrode it and set itself free. He took a deep breath, and steeled himself. Hisewell controlled it. He would not give in. Soon a bubbling red cloak surrounded him. It was calmer than normal though, less chaotic. He felt more control than he ever had before. The pain that came with it was excruciating, but he bit down and endured. His chakra coils burned as they expanded and solidified. His bones made connections and grew. All the work Tsunade had done to set him up to heal properly was finished. Several months' worth of healing done in moments. It hurt, but it felt so good. For the first time in a month, he was whole. A toothy grin lit up his face as he channeled chakra, and it jumped at his direction. Less than a thought was all it took to turn it to his natural element. The wind sent to his arm and legs spiraled and sliced through the cast so cleanly they took a full second and a shake for them to fall off his body. He flexed his ankle and hand, feeling the returned strength. Then he turned to the arena. A second tail formed behind him as he shot through the air like a bullet to help his team. Sasuke was bleeding from his thigh. He'd suffered worse of course, but it would need attention. The pain he felt when he put weight on it was loud in his mind. It was also entirely drowned out by his anger. The arena erupted into chaos when Gaara came out of his domed defense. Sasuke did not care. All he cared about was putting down the beast in front of him. As he watched, Gaara formed a giant arm of sand. Sasuke rushed him anyway. The sand arm was faster than he'd anticipated, and though his Sharingan saw the movement, he was not prepared to dodge that sort of speed. He was smacked away by the large appendage, careening towards the arena wall. Before he could smash into it, a hand on his back steadied and brought him to a halt. When they slid to a stop, he turned enough to see who it was. Hinata stood there firmly, veins bulging around her eyes. He gave her a nod and thanks, and turned back to Gaara. As they watched, the sand grew up Gaara's shoulder to his neck. The boy fell to one knee holding his head in pain again. Sasuke saw his opportunity. "You're weak," the voice in his head whispered. It was louder now than it had been in the past. He shook it off and threw 3 kunai at Gaara. They were blocked by the boy's Jonin-sensei. "You lack power." Sasuke growled and made to sprint at the 2 sand shinobi. A figure flickered in front of him before he could move though. It was a masked shinobi, a member of Konoha's Anbu. The masked nin's build was familiar. So was his chakra flow. "You won't touch these genin. Your battle is with me," the Anbu member said. He withdrew the long katana from his back. Sasuke smirked. It seemed Sensei had been there to watch them. Hinata wore a similar look on her face. "Hyuga-san, Uchiha-san. Your mission is to hold off Gaara until I can suppress him," the Anbu said without taking his eyes off the sand Jonin. Then he was gone in a flash, the sound of metal colliding with metal following him. "You're always being saved by somebody else." Sasuke grunted and clenched his fists. It was just a voice in his head. "It's not real. It's not Itachi. You lack the power and the conviction necessary. You don't have enough hatred. You will fail. It couldn't be him. He's been gone. 5 years he's been gone. It can't be him. You'll never be strong enough." "Shut up," Sasuke shouted. His face was twisted into something visceral. Hinata looked at him confused, but he didn't even notice. He charged blindly at Gaara again. The result was no different. The crazed sand Jinchuuriki used whatever that giant sand arm was to smack him away. He hurtled towards another wall of the arena. Hinata moved but wasn't fast enough to catch him. He saw a red blur streaking out of the corner of his eyes, but his Sharingan wasn't fast enough to keep up with it. His momentum was stopped abruptly, and everything became clear. Naruto. The blur was Naruto. That's who caught him. Saved again before you can even land a hit. "Pity," Sasuke grunted through the voice that was poisoning his mind, and tried to focus on Naruto. "Naruto?" Hinata asked, rushing up to them. "How? Your injuries?" He smiled at her, a bright grin that lit up her world, even if he did have sharper fangs than usual. "Yeah, the fox and I have a tentative agreement." He glanced at Gaara, and the light in his eyes dimmed ever so slightly. "I couldn't let you guys face him alone. It won't matter how many of you there are. Mother will have your blood," Gaara said. His voice was borderline hysterical. The giant arm had grown up over his face now. His right eye had changed coloring. A yellow star sat where the pupil otherwise would. The giant sand arms slashed through the air at them. Hinata dropped into a stance to prepare to stop it. Sasuke stumbled briefly as his support disappeared. Before the sand arm could reach Hinata, it exploded. In its place was Naruto, standing with a fist out. Two tails of red chakra flickered behind him. "I won't let you hurt anyone else, Gaara. Least of all my team," Naruto said. His voice was more hoarse than normal, but more powerful too. Everything about him was more defined. His whiskers darker, teeth sharper, hair wilder, and his eyes. His eyes were bright red and slitted. He'd briefly been in Two Tails before, but he'd never been able to sustain it, let alone with the control he was showing now. "It's not up to you who I hurt. You can't stop me. I have to prove my existence." Gaara's voice was beginning to sound less like him and more like something more primal. Similar to Naruto's but entirely different. "I don't care what you think, I won't let it happen," Naruto said, and then he was gone in a flash. Sasuke could barely follow Naruto's movements as he attacked Gaara. Where did all this speed come from? This power? Did the Nine Tails really give him this much power? How naive of you. This only scratches the surface of what he can do. You've fallen behind so much, Sasuke. Set me free and let me give you some of my power so you can catch up. Sasuke tried to fight the voice in his head, but as he watched Naruto fight in a way that put him to shame, he struggled. He remembered, vividly, the feeling of Itachi putting him in the Tsukiyomi. Of watching him murder their entire clan. Their family. Then he remembered the feeling against the sound ninja in the forest. How absolutely strong and powerful he felt. Like he could take on the world. Like he could take on Itachi. He finally stopped struggling, his willpower fading as the curse mark flushed chakra into his system. Black flames grew over his face as the curse mark spread, and he smirked. Jiraiya sat outside the purple barrier, desperately inking materials to try and find a way through it. Orochimaru was in there, and he'd be damned if he was going to let him get away this time. As he worked, the giant snake smashed through the wall. Judging by the sounds, Tsunade had met it there shortly after. He just wasn't quick enough. He'd spent a fair amount of time going over sealing and its techniques while training Naruto over the last half-decade or so. But it wasn't enough. He wasn't Minato or Kushina. He couldn't do things on the fly like this, even after all these years. He was skilled, but he just didn't have their talent. His sensei could handle himself, he knew that. He wasn't the Hokage for nothing, and he'd earned all the nicknames he'd been given. He was old though, and Orochimaru was devious. Not to mention that sensei had a soft spot for him, even now. He had to get in there and help. He kept working, hoping that his idea would pay off. And then Orochimaru performed a summoning jutsu. There were no snakes, however. No metal gates. Instead, a coffin slowly rose from the ground. Please, not the Edo Tensei, anything but that. The first coffin revealed the number 1 labeled on it, and Jiraiya swore. A second coffin began rising, with "second" written on it, and Jiraiya doubled his pace. A third coffin began rising, and Jiraiya froze. It couldn't be. Not him. Anybody but him. They wouldn't stand a chance if Minato was revived. How the hell did Orochimaru even get his DNA? His fears were quelled when Sarutobi performed an earth jutsu and held onto the jutsu long enough for it to fail. Jiraiya let out a breath that he didn't know he'd been holding, but still stared at Orochimaru. How could he dare try something so sick? The coffin lids fell open, and the village's founders, the first 2 Hokage, were revealed. Sarutobi sensei never looked so old. The lines on his face seemed to deepen, as did his frown. The disappointment and sadness he showed was immense. Seeing the 2 previous Hokage kick Jiraiya into gear. 3-on-1 against cage-level opponents would be too much for Hiruzen this far past his prime. He hoped his series of tags would work. It was based off of Naruto's sealing chains, the ones that could disrupt chakra flow. If he could just modify them to stick to the barrier long enough to work, then he could help. Time passed faster than he would have liked. Sensei was talking, as were the Hokage and Orochimaru. Then the fighting started. There were bright flashes of fire and the sound of rushing water. A massive wall grew out of the ground. Jiraiya worked through it all. It was only when trees began to grow out of, well, everything, that Jiraiya looked up. Sensei was trapped. It was now or never. He stuck the tags in their 4 spots on the barrier and flared his chakra, channeling it through them. They hummed with power. The symbols grew dangerously bright, and then the barrier began to fade. It took all of 2 or 3 seconds before it was gone. There was no time to test it. He lunged through the barrier. There was no strange sensation like he might have expected. He didn't catch on fire. He was just suddenly inside of it. The tags hummed louder and began to leak smoke, and then they failed. The opening in the barrier closed, and he was locked in. Relief ran through him when he saw Sarutobi break through the trees, his trusted summons Enma in hand. He could afford the few moments he would need to break the barrier then. He pulled out his remaining 4 tags he'd taken the precious time to ink. Be prepared for anything, he'd always told Naruto, and now his advice would pay off. With a flick of the wrist, the 4 paper tags moved unnaturally quickly through the air. A flash of purple hair and orange eyes came and went in an instant. They stuck on the corner of the barrier right in front of one of Orochimaru's henchmen. "Sensei," he shouted, channeling chakra into the tags. As usual though, Hiruzen was a half-step ahead of him, already finishing seals for a fire jutsu. White-hot balls of flame streaked through the freshly opened barrier, and exploded inside the small pocket. To the credit of the sound ninja, he held the barrier until the second ball of flame made contact, before dropping the jutsu and body flickering away, smoke trailing him. The whole barrier flickered out of existence. The barrier that, somehow, had been supporting a large portion of the first Hokage's Mokuton. The forest that had grown into the barrier didn't last long without its support. Tree trunks as large as those in the Forest of Death began to fall. The weight of them all crashing down on the roof of the arena. It was too much, and it caved in, falling into the stands below. The several shinobi doing battle in that section grabbed the comrades that they could and hightailed it out of there. Luckily, civilians and genin had already been funneled out of the arena and towards the shelters. Jiraiya, having still been near the edge of the barrier, leapt away to the side and dodged a majority of the debris. His sensei, however, was not so lucky. Sarutobi was still in the thick of the woods, and although it was a clear spot, he was still surrounded. Despite all they had been through, Jiraiya was still surprised when Hiruzen managed to cut through all the remnants of his own teacher's jutsu. When the dust and debris settled, there was a 10-foot radius around him of only sawdust and wood chips. His predecessors didn't make nearly the effort that he did to cut through it all. Instead, their bodies were reforming not too far away. Naturally, Orochimaru managed to slip through it all, and rose up out of the ground and through the trees without a scratch on him. "Jiraiya," Sarutobi said, "why would you disrupt the barrier? It was containing the damage from our fight. The civilians and genin are out, and you can't take on all 3 of them. Not when you're holding back because of him. Orochimaru is my mistake, not yours. I know, I'll let you take care of him. I'm just here to buy you the time you need." Sarutobi nodded slowly at the only student who still carried his will of fire. "Very well. Tobirama hasn't used Hiraishin and Hashirama's Mokuton isn't near as powerful. They are but shells of their former power." He put his hand on Jiraiya's shoulder. "Still, do not take them lightly." Jiraiya nodded back in understanding. The Edo Tensei was already a difficult jutsu to stomach, let alone when it was used to pit long-since-past sensei against their former students. It was a strong technique though, nobody could question that. The Nidaime wouldn't have bothered to invent it otherwise. The reanimated shinobi couldn't die, nor would they run out of chakra. It was a small consolation that they weren't as powerful as when they had still walked the earth. Sarutobi flickered away, the clash of metal signaling that he was dueling with Orochimaru yet again. The first and second Hokage shifted to help their jutsu caster, and it was Jiraiya's time to act yet again. He cut them off, leveling the first with a kick to the chest, and the second with a small fireball. "Sorry, Lord First, Lord Second. I can't let you interfere with Sensei's fight. It's an inter-team conflict. No outside influences," Jiraiya said. The second Hokage's body became whole again, smoke wafting off his shoulders. "You are young Saru's student as well?" he asked. "Yeah, me and the snake over there. And your grandniece, Suna's your teammate?" Hashirama said, standing up. "Where is she?" A resounding boom sounded out from across the village, a minor earthquake erupting from a punch. "Ah, I see. I knew she'd get her mother's strength." He chuckled. "You're telling me," Jiraiya said, dodging a punch from the second Hokage. You should have seen the punch she laid on me after she caught me. He was interrupted by the first Hokage approaching him with taijutsu, and now he was defending against two Kage at once, too busy to continue with his story. There was an exchange of blows, ending with Jiraiya using a cross block to deflect a power kick from the first, that sent him sliding back. Tell me, why has Hiruzen not passed that godforsaken hat? Tobirama asked. Certainly there have been plenty of candidates? Jiraiya pulled some tagged kunai, seemingly out of nowhere. He has. He did. My student was the fourth. There's a fourth? Hashirama asked, an almost childlike surprise showing on his face. Was elder brother. Tobirama turned back to Jiraiya. What happened? Jiraiya's brain was engaged in the conversation, but like any high-level ninja, that was only the surface of it. The underneath, his subconscious and a great deal of his conscious thought, was taken up by the fight. Analyzing the jutsu, and what they were capable of. Lining that up and comparing it to what he had read and heard about each. Calculating what would and wouldn't work without even trying. He'd done this dance 100, maybe 1,000 times. It was like second nature to him. There was an attack. The nine-tailed fox was set loose on the village. He sacrificed himself to seal it away in his own son. He wanted to preserve the balance of power, Jiraiya said. The sadness in his voice and body language was clear to the two Hokage. He used that moment to throw his exploding kunai. The headbands might have signaled leave, but this was his village, and he would do what he must to protect it, even from them. He was sure they would understand. Well-worn hand signs were sped through, and an earth dragon ripped through the ground and carried the second Hokage off. Without a single beat missed, he shifted hand seals and lunged at the first Hokage. His hair whipped out and grew in length, wrapping itself around Hashirama. A final 3 hand signs and carefully controlled chakra, and sealing script spread down his hair from his head, locking the first Hokage into place. This is an Uzumaki technique? Hashirama questioned. Jiraiya nodded. I am the guardian of one of the last. He was kind enough to let me learn a few. Hashirama frowned at that, the implications running deep. I am sorry to hear that. And I am sorry about your student. It's a difficult thing to lose one younger than you. That you invested so much time into, and passed your will of fire on too. Protecting the younger generation is why we founded the village in the first place. Their conversation was interrupted by the second Hokage making himself known, a slicing water jutsu cutting through Jiraiya's hair, ending the sealing technique that he was sure wasn't truly holding the first at bay. More blows were exchanged between the three, debris being flung up left and right from their powerful movements. The jutsu used stayed compact, meant to damage one rather than an entire battlefield, and for that, Jiraiya was grateful. He was beginning to wear down though, ever so slowly. He wouldn't have time to call upon the toads and enter sage mode, not if he was going to keep these two distracted. He had no idea what was going on with Sensei and Orochimaru, but neither had interrupted his fight. He could only imagine they were still going at it. He was racking his brain for ideas when it happened, and even the first two Hokage froze. The one-tailed beast had appeared. Fully formed. It was like that night all over again for Konoha. A nightmare many had experienced, brought to life yet again. It towered above them all, and they stared for a moment. Then, just when everybody thought the Chunin exams couldn't get any more dramatic, a little blonde genin wrapped in red chakra shook the world. Bring down the house. And that concludes part 4 of this story. Thank you for spending your time here at Ichiraku Ramen and listening all the way to the end. Your support helps keep these stories alive and allows the shinobi world to continue through new adventures and alternate timelines. If you enjoyed positive intervention, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Once again, full credit goes to Stolen Hawk 22, the original writer of this story. If you would like to read the original version, you can find the link to the story in the description below. Let me know in the comments what story you would like to hear next. Until the next time, stay safe, and I'll see you again at Ichiraku Ramen.